Leland. Justin and I need some to listen to good. Yep. Who is really in power?
Bless you. Do you care about having a naturally strong immune system?
Oh, yeah.
If so, you will probably be shocked to know that most vitamin C is actually made from genetically modified corn.
Oh, my God.
You know, when you look at a pyramid, we've been manipulated to believe the power in a pyramid is at the top. It ain't. The top of the pyramid is there because the rest of the pyramid's holding it up. We're holding this whole thing together. There's a story I told many years ago of a British comedian called Larry Grayson, who died, I went to his memorial service in Covent Garden, and this other comedian did this tribute to his life in which he read out this story that Larry Grayson had told him. When they were going around the variety halls and the theaters in the 60s, they had this all-male show. And Larry Grayson was the only woman in it because he's dressed up as a woman. And he said that the end of the show, the last scene, all the sailors, all the men came on dressed as sailors, and they were singing Rule Britannia. You know, Rule Britannia, Britannia rules the waves. Oh, I'm very pleased for you. Okay. And as it built up, Larry Grayson would come on dressed as Britannia with the helmet and the shield, and he would be manhandled up the side of this pyramid to the top for the big finish. And he said one night, things seemed to be going rather well. He said, and then I noticed that a sailor in the bottom left-hand corner had got rather a cough. And this cough got worse and worse and worse to the point where the sailor couldn't stay in the pyramid anymore and stepped out of it. Larry Grayson, symbolic of this elite at the peak of the pyramid, ended up in the second row. And the elite, the power center, had done nothing to bring about this. One sailor, the bottom of the pyramid, had got a cough. And the whole thing collapsed. That's it. We, the powerless people, are holding the powerful people up there, and they know that. They're terrified of us realizing that. And that's why this network of manipulation works so hard to keep us in these states. No longer will we just do it because we're told to do it. Is it just? Is it right? Okay, I'll do it. Is it unjust? Is it not right? I ain't doing it. We start to make the decisions on what we will and will not do based on our values and not some imposition from the dark suits. These people are gonna grant me or grant me not my freedom. I'm all that is. You can't grant.
I'm all that is. Well, it's the we and me. That is all there is. And, many people have been talking to me, oh, you need to be more business-minded. You need to do this. You need to do that. You need to have better titles. You need to have, Well, it's you guys out there who like or dislike this, And as I do these shows, I go in waves. Sometimes there are lots of people who watch, and then there's sometimes not so much, right? And, I used to be a performing artist, I was an artist, painter, sculptor, and my mediums were light. I would paint with light and sculpt in light. And I started, I had all these Tesla toys, all these big transformers and, Tesla devices that made lightning. And I would do, I would perform this. I had this suit that made me look like a wizard. I had a big cape, but underneath it, I had this metal suit that was kind of insulated, so I could be in this environment of, millions of volts. And I would do these performances inside squash courts because there were three concrete walls and a glass wall. And the audience could sit behind the glass wall and not get shocked. But the ELF would be so strong that it would have an effect on them. It would make their hair stand up on end. And if I cycled the transformer, it would move back and forth. And, it was, and so it's a performance. They titled me a performance artist. And there was my good buddy Beth Lapidus. She did that, performance art. And she would tell stories. And she had these big books, big books, like 5x5 books. And she would come on in a costume. And she would flip the pages as she told the story, right? And she was a painter. And so she had these painted things. And she ended up in California as a stand-up comedian. She did quite well. She was on TV and all of that, but she was, at school to be a visual artist, and she kind of got into it that way. And then I have another friend, a woman I lived with, and she was a filmmaker, and her roommate, they had a loft, and I had my own loft. I had this dark refrigerator, and across the street, they had this nice sunny loft. Anyway, so I spent a lot of time in the sun with and she was a German, Swiss descent, and she grew up in the United States a good deal. So, she was Americanized German Swiss, and she had, kind of a German accent, but she also had an American accent, and she was a filmmaker, and I helped her with her tech, I did all her whatever she wanted me to do. I was her grip. And that was fun. And we mostly shot her roommate, who became quite famous because she was a seamstress, and she would make these just exotic costumes, like ducks and walking pyramids and just really amazing stuff. And, she would, perform in these costumes, and and I saw her 20 years later at a university that I was at. And she, the student activity campus community hired her, brought her in from New York and performed her shtick, and it was quite interesting to see how she evolved. And I was there, and she met me, and she was, "What are you doing here?" And I said, "Well, I'm kind of a itinerant scholar." And she couldn't understand how I could have gone from being the disco dude, electrician, artist, performer, stuff, to being a scholar. And that has been mostly my experience. And that I've, like I said, when I was a young man and I apprenticed under one of the guy who had the first electrician's license in the United States. He was Nikola Tesla's bench electrician. He was involved in all the Tesla everything, from the Niagara plant to Warden Cliffs to the Philadelphia experiment. And he trained me to be a master electrician. And I started working for him at 9, and by 11, I was a journeyman electrician, not a master, a journeyman, but a very good one, right? And he said, just keep going, kid, because, I taught you well. And what he taught me well was to always do my best. Never ignore, never say, oh, that's good enough. I did my best in everything I did in the electrical project, right? I'd be sent there. I do my best getting there on time and being there prepared. I do my best sussing out what they wanted and writing it down, and kind of, making sure that's exactly what the client wanted. And I did my best at, setting out a plan on how to do it. I'd run it by the client, and then I would make my list of materials and what it would cost and all of that, and run it by the client. And I, every step of the way, did my best. Every hole I drilled to put an anchor in, every wire I connected to a terminal, everything I did my best. I didn't rush. I didn't, just, oh, that's good enough. I did my best. And by the time I was 15, my mentor, said, "You're a master. You're a master electrician at 15. right? You know it better than anybody, who has a license. You really you put in, 6 years, and you've always done your best every day, and I'm proud of you. And now, I'm gonna set you free to go off and do everything you want to do, but you're still working for me, and you're still doing jobs. But you're gonna be uh, the number one guy in this department. And I was the master of that, and that was fixing old stuff because that was his forte. That's what I did with him all the time. His son did all the like brand new skyscrapers and all that stuff, and I worked on those things too, just to get that experience. And I worked in a union environment, and but when we worked on the old stuff, that wasn't quite the union environment. And so by the time I was 16, I was on my own. I mean, I still worked for those guys, but I was doing I mean, they would send me up to do something for, let's say, a real estate developer, and I would do that, and then they say, "Well, can you work on the side? Because I got all this other stuff, and Grandpa still wants you to just do this." And I said, "Sure," and I would, and I, would do my best at everything I did till I succeeded, excelled, was exceptional. And I wasn't exceptional because I was white and male and privileged. I was exceptional because I did my best, right? So earlier today, I was talking about lots of different things. And one of the stories that I started was talking about Dalie, right? And how I met him at an opening, and how it was just on the street from where I lived. And so after the opening, we all went up to my loft, and I had this amazing loft on Worcester Street that had, like 28 skylights, gigantic ones, 12 foot by 12 foot, and the whole back wall of the building was glass, and the front was these gigantic windows. And because this building was built before electric lights, right? And so it was a factory building, and so the majority of the illumination of what they were doing was by sunlight and gas mantle light. And those were still there. The gas was still there, right? And the electricity up into that loft was DC, old Edison DC. And they just, it was too hard for them to disconnect it. So all they did was, take all of the DC stuff out in that space, and when the AC was brought in the building, they brought that and put that there. But they built a wooden box around the DC cables, and then they covered it up with this very hard, like mica tar that turned into almost concrete. So it insulated the cables, and you couldn't, and then I, put made a big rectifier, and then drove spikes through the tarry mica into the copper, and then had cables going from those spikes into the rectifier, and I had pretty much free electricity on that DC side. And so I, it was in my studio. I painted in there, I sculpted in there, I made all kinds of devices in there because it was like 7,000 square feet. And I told the story how I met this a fireman who was captain of a company, captain of a firehouse, and he had a really bad accident, so he couldn't fight fires. So he taught firemen to be firemen, and they would go up to the South Bronx and burn down these houses that were, what the rich lived in the 19th century. And he went to Cooper Union to be an architect, but ended up as a fireman. And so I met him and this other friend of mine, Olga Kluber, and we had this urban archaeology architecture. It's like we took all this old stuff and we brought it down to we had a lot on the Bowery, and right next to Rissa Sarah's bank, and we brought all this, architectural stuff, doors, mahogany doors, and woodwork, and marble stairs and staircases, and you name it, we took it out of there. And And because we would go to burn, he would go to burn the building down. He would have his junior, trainee firemen. The first part of the day, they would take the building apart and move all the stuff out. And I'll go with their big truck, would truck it all the way down to our thing. And then they'd set the building on fire and practice putting it out. And taking all that stuff out that might fall down and hurt them, was a safety measure. That's how we justified it to the city. And we just took it away. And so I had a lot of stuff, all kinds of furniture and from those places. And, in my loft, I had all these couches and, had an amazing stove, old Garland stove, 9 burners with a friolator and a Garland and 2 ovens. And it had a hood built into it, so to, from the, because it had the burners, but it also had a grill. I mean, it was the best stove I ever had. And I carried that sucker around to a number of restaurants I had over the years. And I sold it. And when, Dalie had this opening at 420, I think it was, with Ivan Karp. And Dalie, his wife or girlfriend or whatever she was a righteous artist in her own right. And anyway, so it was his big opening, and everybody was all around Dalie. And Dalie, he was a performance artist. I mean, that was really what he was doing. His paintings were just a continuation of what he had done in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and at the party, so we had the opening, and then the closed opening, and then, by around 11 o'clock, everybody was leaving the gallery, and I just lived down the street, and, I would say, hey, can we go up to your loft and just hang? And I said, sure. So it was, Dalie, Ivan, I think it was Andy Warhol. Who else was there? A few other folk. And me. And they're all, I think the youngest person other than me was like 45. And they were my, it wasn't like I was a kid. They called me the kid. But, I was part of that cadre, right? And so I had this really amazing loft, and I had all these things I was working on, and people were looking at them, and I lit it up like theater. I had Fresnels and Licos and all kinds of, par lamps. And so everything was in pools of light. I had this kitchen right in the middle of the loft, and I had pools of light on that. And then where the couches were, there were coffee tables, and I had pools of light on that. So it was quite a theatrical environment. And we got very relaxed. Everyone, there was party favors there. I don't know who that person is. So who is you? Who's that you? Anthony, this you guy here? Is that a... I put the things out that said you had to be, whatchamacallit, a subscriber. And then I tried to do it again, and then I couldn't find it. I mean, the YouTube thing is like a swirling ball for me. It's never like last night's show had 186 people watched the show, and then this morning it said I had 60. I mean, I don't quite understand that. And I don't really care that much, I don't, John is always, you have to do this and do this, and, read all this stuff on how to make your show, make you more money, and be, and I'm not even thinking that way, right? This is a shamanic ceremony, right? And it's bringing this energy to you, the cadre, and everybody who watches it, right? And I'm doing it because these years, I've been now doing it almost, if not 3 years, right? I started in 2018, May of 2018. Too bad you don't have a piece of art from Dalie or Warhol. Actually, I do, just not here, not in John's house. But yeah, I have a lot of art, and I have it with a friend of mine who has an art gallery, and I've been trying to have her, you know, um, you know, not authenticize it and give the value because yeah, people gave me lots of art just for fun, right? And I have a bunch of you know Dalie scribblings, and but my father threw out half of the stuff I had. I was I could have like retired on the photos I had, and I've had that happen a great deal. People I've left stuff here and there and here and there, and people just pilfered through it, and in a certain dynamic, it doesn't matter, right? And just like my stories, I constantly say, good morning, good evening, and welcome to Dreamy Dreamland. And I am your Sensei Al Bob. And don't believe a word I say, because whether these stories are true or not, it is how it affects you, how it hits you, how it makes you feel. And you can tell whether a story is true or not, right? And the true essence of a story is how it makes you feel, you know? So that is my, as a griot, that's what I'm doing, I'm telling you a story that psychologically, emotionally, spiritually, and shamanically affects you to a place where you kind of go, it kind of rattles, opens up doorways, the doors of perception are inside of you, right? And so, right now, I want everyone just take a big breath. And we're practicing, every time I do this, we're practicing to be able to go into the Akashic record without any big brouhaha, just like bing, there you are, right? So there you are in your Akashic record. You're standing right in the front of the imaginary mirror, illuminated by the prana that you're breathing in, grounded into Mother Earth, Gaia, and your chi creates, is that ground between Gaia and your prana self. And that as you breathe in that energy, it goes into your blood, the ground swirls the circuit and makes the connection of the spiritual understanding. And that's what I'm bringing you into. Because the only way you can be consciously intent is have that spiritual connection, right? And it has to be one that you feel, right? Feel spiritually, physically, emotionally, psychologically, shamanically, right? And these stories are the key to that. And whether they're true or not, or what it is how it makes you feel, right? So whether I go viral and become a blah, blah, blah and make zooby dooby doobies, it almost doesn't matter. And what Buddy said once was that, he knew I was doing the right thing by how much, not, I don't really get it. Trolls come in here. I just bopped one out of here. But the way the whole mechanism just is fluid, meaning the YouTube, Google mechanism for me is just fluid. There is no point I go on and I can expect, because I tried to do something I did today and it wasn't even there. The thing that said, only good for people who subscribe, I couldn't get it to show up for me to push the button, and just things like that. And, makes me go, But Buddy's acumen of understanding that all of this stuff just shows that I'm doing the right thing, right? I'm doing my job here, right? I'm doing my best, right? Do it every day in every way. Bring the peace of the earth to you so you can co-create with love's one love. So you can be your best. Because in these minutes, moments, days, weeks, months that are coming at us, first of all, there is no linear time. bang, and we're in that bang, right? They, they don't, first they say, oh, all this big mass that we can't account for. Oh, there must be this thing called dark matter. No, now there's something else happening. And so all of the rules, all the dynamics, all the things of the universe is constantly creeping, changing. So why should I expect anything? And why should you? The constant you can have in your life is that you do your best. So there we were in my loft, 19. Oh, what year was that? I guess it was 65, right? 65, 66. And maybe, no. I came back from, yes, no. It's in the early 70s, 74, right? And I didn't move downtown to Pearl Street until 75, 75, 76, right? So it's probably 74, 75. So we're up there, and everyone's really laid back. It's getting towards about 1. I made some crepes and other yummy things for everyone, and we're drinking fluidly, and we're smoking, and we're doing other things, and not everyone doing the same thing. And people, it was so big space, we weren't all together. And I had all these skylights, and Worcester Street, the back alley, had no lights whatsoever. So the back wall of that building and the back part of the skylights had no real light pollution. And I had these big flat couches that you could sleep on, and they were really wide. And you just lie there and look up at the stars. I was one of the only places in New York that you could do that, because I would turn the lights out on that part of the loft, and the lights I had on were at the other end, 7,000 square feet. So a good 200 feet away was the only light. I turned all the other lights off, and I'm on the couch. The other people are over near the kitchen, and they're all talking and smoking and this and that. And I'm lying on the couch looking at the stars. And Dalie, and I met him, and we talked, at the opening, and we talked when we were all sitting in my kitchen, eating and drinking and smoking and doing other stuff. And it was kind of like the 70s show, where the kids are in the basement and they're smoking herb, and you don't see them smoke herb, but the room gets smokier and smokier, and the kids get stupider and stupider. Anyway, so I like everything in moderation. So, some people were smoking more and drinking more, and others not so much, and I was in moderation. And I like everything of quality and in moderation. So we were smoking some really good boo, and I brought out a bottle of my Paddy's Irish whiskey and 2 bottles of really nice wine. So it was one of those really special evenings, and it was really sweet and nice. And I'm like, I just people were just some had fallen asleep on the couch or two, and others were talking, and I just kind of go over the couch, and I'm looking at the stars, and I'm looking, and then, I feel this weight go on the couch, and it was at the other end of the couch, so it was like in the direction my head was pointed. And I didn't quite see because the lights were off, and his body is like almost touching my head. We're head to head looking up at the stars, and it's Dalie. I've never seen stars in New York like this, and I can't reproduce his. He would talk a lot, Dalie. That's about as good I can do of a Dalie impersonation, and we talked about life. Are there other people out there? What is, and I was, reading, what's his name? He's a Danish philosopher. Anyway, and I was also, it's a guy named Paul Brunton. I was reading some of his stuff, and also my, Dutch uncle, Thomas Merton. And so we're talking about, and all of those are all those philosophers and theologists were talking about the meaning to life, the connection to God, and they none of them used that word. Even Merton, who was a Catholic priest, we're talking about spirit and the prime moving force, and we talked about that. We talked about art, and we talked about art as an aboriginal thing, that it's not, So, Ivan Karp over there, he's the biggest one of the biggest gallery owners, biggest money man, has a real fancy gallery up on 57th Street. My one of my mentors, Billy Kluver, he brought the modern art to America in the 20s and curated the Armory Show, which is now where the Museum of Modern Art is. I mean, that's how I met Mr. 420 himself and Ivan. And Ivan was shrewd. He had was educated in art history. He knew everything about it, and he had a real sensibility for important expression and what was going to be valuable in the near and distant future. And he was like, to him, he was like a guy who loved to gamble, but he knew everything about what he was gambling on. So his odds were that he was going to win most of the time, and if not, he would force the win. And he was an interesting guy, Evan Karp was. And Brooke Alexander was the other big time gallery guy that I built his gallery and lit his gallery and did his apartment uptown and because you work for those guys and then they would turn you on to other people, other restaurants, other galleries, other rich people's condos and houses up there in the Hamptons, and that's what I did for 20 years. And I would do 2 or 3 of those jobs, have a bundle of cash, and skip out to live in Europe and live in Ireland, I lived in Sweden for many times and, travel the world on their nickel, right? And early on in my life when I was doing that, before I was really the dude, I would do a job or two, have a fistful of dollars, and I would hitchhike or ride the rails. I did that in the 64 to 65. So anyway, all of this kind of rambling that I'm doing right now, I did with Dalie. We told this story, that story. He told stories when he was a boy and his travels and World War II and the Cold War over in Europe, but he came to America like in the 20s, so he was here. He traveled back and forth, but he's an American. Once he threw that piano out the window at the Regis Hotel, that was like his big performance art piece that hit the newspapers. They talked about his art show and his work and what it meant, and his work, his body of early work was really important. It represented a style and a tact. And we were talking about his motivations for that and what it was, and that in the 60s it was being reproduced, mass reproduced, and made into big posters for kids to put on the wall while we're smoking pot. And I said, so what was your motivation? What was because you were like and we both talked about this, and it was like we were finishing each other's sentences, and we were talking about the artist in the first person, the guy who did that first scribbling on the cave wall, right? And what motivated him, why he did that, and why he kept doing it. And I told him the story about when I went to Australia and I went to Ayers Rock, and they had all of these caves all around the base of Ayers Rock that looked, and they weren't like geologic, they looked like someone burnt them out with a laser, because all the walls and ceilings and was like circular, almost perfect circular, and went deep. Some of these things went deep in hundreds of feet, and everything was smooth, right? And there was a lot of carbon because people went in there and started fires to keep warm and to see. And they would pick up the charred piece of wood in the morning, and they would scribble something on the wall. And the guide took us in to see one of these, and the picture was scribbled on the wall, and it looked like the guide had like grabbed, because there was a fire pit there, and it was obvious people had fires in there, and it was pieces of wood that were carbonized, and you could have and it looked like he did that right that morning, right, or that afternoon before we went in there, and he talked all about this, that, and the other thing, and I just was looking at the picture, and it just drew me in. And I sat on the floor. When everyone left, I told my wife I was going to sit in there and meditate for a while. Couldn't go anywhere. There's a little motel, and we were going to stay at that motel. Anyway, so they all went on to the rest of the tour, and I sat in there. And as I sat and meditated, I focused on that wall. I became hypnotized by the wall. And the wall, the pictures underneath the one the guy had scribbled from a piece of charred wood the other day, I could see underneath and underneath and underneath and underneath and underneath and underneath. And then it started moving like a movie projector. And that's when I realized that that's what this was. These guys in the way back, like a million years ago, who did the first drawings there, they were drawing on top of each other, and it was an animated movie, and people saw it moving. And when I was describing that to Dalie, he was, it's pitch black. I couldn't see him. I could just hear him. And it's almost like he was crying. He said, when I was a boy, I took a hike into a cave, and I had that same experience. And that was it. We were buds. We had this, and it went beyond his like falsetto, self-aware, self-conscious acting of being Dalie with the mustache and all of that. And he said that's where all those drawings and paintings came from. And it was, a pretty reverential kind of experience. And we talked and talked and talked until we just both fell asleep. And I mean, it's a very, that loft, it faces east-west, and it has windows on both sides. And so, and it's more facing south. All the windows are more facing south than north. So it's a very, the sun comes up, and this is when there were no tall buildings around. So, the sun would come up around 6 and hit those windows, between 6:30 and 7. And they would like they were like mirrors. They catch the light and shine it down into the space. And depending on where you were, you get a big blast of sunlight right in your face. You can't really sleep. And that's what woke us up, And some people were, milling around my kitchen base. And I had, made a big pot of coffee. So you just turn the knob and the gas burner would burst into flame. Some people had that, and some other people were, good enough. They looked around. I had these little refrigerators at the base of. They were the kind of refrigerators that are in delis. So they're like, right, you can open up a drawer and there it is, and then there's the doors that have the bigger stuff. And so people were taking out bacon and eggs and English muffins and toasting them up in the oven, and they were doing a pretty good job of not burning anything and making it smell pretty good. And so we got up and had a cup of coffee, and I had some I still had a bunch of these buns from Chinatown, and we had a very nice breakfast. And we smoked some more and drank some more, and it was Saturday morning, and we didn't have to rush out. It wasn't like a workaday world. And we kind of strolled out around 10 and went our different directions. And Dalie and I went up with Dalie and Ivan, we went up to the West Village into the Paris Commune and had croissants and shrimp and grits and hogbats and other southern Louisiana things, and really good coffee. And we talked, and Ivan was telling Dalie that I was like involved in organizing the young art world through a number of organizations and different like underground galleries like the Shuttle and Mary Boone, before she became the big thing in the East Village, um, and who else? A lady who started printed matter, Lucy Lepard, and this was the alternative art scene, and it became the big time art scene. It outshone in a lot of ways the old art scene. I mean, it's hard to go up against Sotheby's, but we were more diverse and spread out all over the place in lots and lots and lots of buildings. And so anyway, he's saying, you guys hit it off last night. You might make a great team. And so anyway, I used to hang out at like I used to hang out at Andy Warhol's factory. I hung out at and Dalí's base of operation was that hotel that he pushed the piano through, and it was a really nice hotel. It was right at where Lexington Avenue starts, and there was a big park in front of that. And there was a not a block or two away, an old garage commercial building that was his studio that he created things in. And he was like Warhol. It was a factory, and he had a ton of people working on stuff. And he said, if you know these artists, do you know anyone who likes my style or paints in my style? Who, I said, yeah, I definitely do. Two or three guys who really, really are like, you're their god. And he said, well, I have these parties at the hotel. I'm going to have one next, this coming Friday. That will be like an extension from my opening. It'll be like the gala party of my opening, and people who will have bought stuff in that night at the opening. And then the next few days between, Ivan's, on the push to sell these things. And then we're going to have the big whoop-de-doo party at the hotel. So you should come and bring anybody who fits that category. And I had this one friend, his name was Frank Lickstudis, and we had gone to Hofstra together. And he was studying, mechanical engineering. He was a great artist, and he loved Dalie. Just loved Dalie. It was his whole life was Dalie. And so, I come up and, hey, Frank, come on into New York. I'm going to, Dalie's having a big party at St. Ritz, and you're invited. What? I said, yep. And not only that, you're going to be in the VIP room. You're going to be hanging with Dalie. He wants to meet you. I told him all about you. What? Yep. That's it. And so, boy, Frank showed up, and I said, bring, your little folder of your drawings and your chalks and your paintings that are on paper, and the Dalie-esque ones. What? Yep, he wants to see him. What? So Frank showed up, with his bells on and his folder of all his work, and we showed up early, and we went up to Dalie's apartment in the hotel, and there's nobody there. It's just me, Frank, and Dalie, and so Dalie's looking at his work, and he says, "This is truly great, Frank. You're going to work for me. You're going to be my assistant." What? Yep. I mean, this is like Frank's dream, So I quit school because I already knew what I was doing, and all the teachers in that theater department, the engineer teachers, the design teachers, all those guys were like, upset with me because I was working, I was Emmy at Carnegie Hall. I worked at Vivian Beaumont Theater. And, that was a theater that the lady who ran the school was, and I was, her best boy. I mean, and these teachers would look at me and say, "So why are you here? You're doing a job I wish I could have gotten. I'm only teaching because I can't." And you're like, what, 19, and and you're already in Nabeth, I see, in Local 3, So those guys were like jealous and really gave me a hard time. I totally ignored them. I didn't give a fuck. And I took my first semester freshman year, I took one design course, and that was it. I mean, I dropped out, dropped dead. And I took philosophy and theology, and I took a directing course, and I took with the lady who ran the school, and another more literary course, playwriting, and and these people were happy to see me instead of being jealous of what I was doing. And so first semester was great, and I met this girl who was truly amazing, and she and I, we became a thing. And she was in the theater department, and she was an actress, and she was really studying language, and she was also studying international affairs. But her mother was the head secretary of the theater department, so she had been in that theater department since she was a little girl, and she was a great actress. And she had languages down, so she had accents down, and she really could act. She really was, and she was gorgeous, unbelievably knockout on stage. And so she always had this, her whole life until she met me, all her boyfriends were just scumbags. And her mother, when I went there, and I didn't meet right off the bat, I met her mother because she's, she runs the theater department, even though Marion Tulin was, the director of it. But she, Marion worked in Lincoln Center and worked on boards of all these different things, National Endowment, you name it, she was on it. And so this lady ran it, and Marion, said, "So this is like my protege, this young man here, and I just got him into school so he wouldn't get drafted, and so he's going to be at your disposal." So the one thing that lady wanted was, she goes, "You would be just right for my daughter. She really needs a boyfriend like you." And I was going, "Well, I don't know." And then, a couple of days later, she introduced us. I said, "Well, I guess I do know." So anyway, but she was involved with one of the scumbags, and then he broke her heart, and I was just right there to comfort her. And I didn't take advantage of the thing. I just took her into New York, and I took her to a discotheque, and we walked in. People were waiting online. Studio, what's the Studio 50? No, it might have been Regine. So they're waiting online. I just walked in, right? The doorman opened it up for me and said, "Al, how you doing? Regine's upstairs. She might want to see you. She's something for you to do." And I took Elaine up there, met her, introduced her to Regine, and she was like blown freaking away, right? And then, after dancing until about midnight, we went over to Buffalo Roadhouse, and I think, I don't know who it was Bachman Turner Overdrive. They had opened at a big or was the second building at Madison Square Garden, and everybody was in the VIP lounge, and we went back there, and she met all these, everybody in the rock and roll world, and she's like 19, and she's like, "Oh my God." And that's how you impress a young lady. And still, I just, I was just kept being her sweetie, her nice, but I didn't jump her bones or take advantage of her emotional thing. I just tried to make her happy and feel good and show life was more than scumbag boyfriends. And so by the second weekend, and we were just always with each other those 2 weeks. And she was working at the radio station at Hofstra, and I would go in there and I would do funny voices, and she was just spinning records, but we, the station manager pretty much had everything picked. And I walked in and I said, well, why listen to that jerk? Let's go to the library, see what stuff they got here. And we did. We picked out some really old jazz and R&B and soul music. And they had a copy of, I had a copy, either I had a copy or they had a copy of the thing, the Velvet Underground and what's her name? And we played Heroin like, for 16 hours. Like we just kept playing it over. They had a really nice turntable, and then they had a record changer that could set it so it would like play the same song over and over. And we played that song I don't know how many times. And that was when there's nobody in there. It was like 9 o'clock to like 6 a.m. And that's when we got frisky. And we turn on the mic every now when we were running around naked and laughing and wrestling. And then we put on Heroin, for another 20 rounds. And so that was, when we signed the deal. And so for a whole year, we had the greatest of great times. And what happened, and this is why I left school, is so I was really enjoying being at that school. And I was really enjoying, because I had this sweetie comrade, and the lady who ran, the person who really ran the department I was in, I was her mother, and she was just, tickle pink and happy as a clam that, her lovely daughter had a boyfriend who treated her like a queen and made her happy. And, they were not, and this is the 60s. And even though these folks were Catholics have lots of sex. And they have lots, especially Irish Catholics, have lots of sex, when they're not married. It's like training sex. And if they have babies, it's okay. That's why the Irish have so many babies. They all don't have the same father. And there are a lot of Catholics who have been Catholics longer than most Americans have been Catholics, like the Italians and the Irish. And they understand that the Roman Catholic religion is just a business and it's corrupt, but there's certain things about it that are valuable. And that is the beauty of the Irish and the Italian folk, is that they really understand what's valuable about life. And it's not a dogma. It's not a book. It's none of that. And so Dalie, he came from, I don't know if he came from Germany, but he came from that part of Europe. And that whole part of Europe where Germany is, and Saint-Laurent and France, and there's about 20 of these little duchy things. They're little countries. And sometimes they're in France, sometimes they're in Brussels, sometimes they're in Germany. And that's what World War I was about. Which empire was going to be the empire. And England was that island over there, but it was like the remnants of the Holy Roman Empire. The Roman Empire, not the Holy Roman Empire, was the Vatican. But the old school Romans, the Reich, the First Reich, went to England. And that's why Hitler never invaded, never dropped the atomic bomb on him, he could have easily captured all of the guys who were stuck at Dunkirk. And then England wouldn't have had an army. I mean, that would have been the smart thing. There was 2 million soldiers there that he could have just vacuumed them up, trailed them off to Poland and kept them there. And that would have been the end of England, because there have been, just old people and kids and nobody to guard the place, right? Nobody to fly the planes, nobody to work in the factories. The women couldn't do everything. They probably could, but it would have made it tough. And but Adolf and his generals were apoplectic because they had them cornered. They could, they were right all around the top of them, and they had 88 aimed down there. They could have blasted, and those guys had no guns, no artillery. All they had was some rifles, and a little 30-06 against a 77 millimeter anti-aircraft gun pointed at you. It's like forget about with fragmentation shells. I mean, it would have been, hamburger all over the highway. But that's Europe. And it still is Europe, that even though it's the EU and all of that stuff, it still has all that fragmentation. And a good example is the Baltic countries that was Yugoslavia. After World War II, after World War One, it was pasted together. World War II and the Cold War solidified it being a country, and all those different groups, the Slavs, the Baltics, the all of them were right into each other for 100 years, to the point where they married into each other's families. And yet still, in 1980, whatever that was, or 90, whatever that was, when the Yugoslavian war, I guess it was in the 90s, because I went to the Sarajevo the Yugoslavian Olympics. The Winter Olympics were in '84, and I shot that. That was my last real big fling as a photojournalist. And then, 4 or 5 years later, they had the Civil War, and, it was like, and these were people who were killing people that were in their families, their brothers-in-laws and their cousins. And it was, oh man, it was a mess. And a lot of those people made it to America. And because I had been there and I had a lot of friends in Sarajevo, because that's where I was, and a lot of them came to the United States, and they're still my good friends. And when people, I hear Americans go on about their siloed political, ideological bents, and or how they suffered, oh, I was picked on in 5th grade. Oh, well, just think if your whole city was blown apart, disintegrates, and you lost your whole family when your mom and the kids went out to the supermarket and are being shot at by a rifle. They were shot at by a 77 millimeter howitzer. It was like unbelievable. And then they went out in the countryside, and one group rounded up a group and killed thousands, where they would go into a town and get all the Muslims and all the Muslim men, and like 1,000 of them, dig a big hole, make them stand in the hole, and then machine gun them, and then bulldoze them over, right? And half the people who got machine gunned were still alive when the bulldozer was running them over. And then they go rape grandma and the mommies and the girls, and it was just. And the more that happens, the worse it gets, because it traumatizes the people who experience it and everyone around them. And that's why we're becoming more sociopathic. And before World War II, Germany was the most democratic, the Weimar Republic, most democratic country in Europe ever, most educated country ever, most refined country ever. And they went collectively insane, and they backed a sociopath, and the whole government of the National Socialist Party were sociopaths. So anyway, Dalie and I, we had conversations like this a lot. And but that night when he had the party in the St. Regis, and I brought Frank up to the room, and Frank was just blown away by Dalie, because Dalie gave Frank 100% of his attention, because it was just Dalie, me, Frank, and Dalie. And we were drinking champagne and smoking boo. And Frank couldn't believe, he was like in heaven. His dream came true, right? So, Dalie goes, so you're going to work in my studio, and you're going to work with me doing my art hand in hand. And so they shook hands, and Frank was going to get paid more than he was, working in the factory. And he was going to have his dream, and he was going to live in the hotel there, because Dalie had a whole, thing, or in the factory. And just, Frank was just on cloud nine. Then we went to the party, and all these famous, rich, and powerful people were, and Dalie's introducing Frank to everyone. And I just sat there and at the bar, And I was there with Ivan and who else? Some other person who was, worked for Art in America, wrote for Art in America. And he was saying that, and he said, so Al, how's it feel to be a pimp? And I laughed. I said, yep, I'm an art pimp. And I did a lot of that, meaning got artists who had real talent connected into galleries and other artists, and this is something that has been in the art world, you know, since like the second century. All of those guys, Da Vinci, all the big guys who did big things for kings and popes. They had the factories. They had all these artisans working for them, and and this is what happened to Frank. So Frank's there. He's happy as a clam. He's expecting like to you just do stuff for, um, Dalie. But right off the bat, Dalie says, "Okay, Frank, I looked at all your work, and I sketched a number of your pieces. Right, how I would do it. I want you to go back and paint how I sketched these paintings, your paintings, right? So, I picked, 10 that I could tell it came from your heart, right? So then I put my heart into my pencil and drew what I want. And now I want you to paint with that same heart what I penciled in, right? And so he did. And then Ivan would sell those paintings. And, Frank could knock out one of Dalie's paintings from his heart in a week, right? And, you know, so Dalie had this big show with Ivan, and Ivan told everyone that he had a lot of Dalie's work in the back room where they, store the paintings. And they just kept, Dalie signed the work that Frank painted, and they sold them for like, $300,000, and it took Frank a week to paint them. And it has Dalie's name on it. And Ivan Karp's little stamp saying, this is the real deal. And Frank was there for a year and a half, and it got to a point where he hated art, the thing he loved the most. He saw how corrupt it was, he moved out of the St. Regis because, Dalie put him in a nice room. He could drink as much as he wanted, smoke as much, have as many girls as he wanted, eat whatever he wanted. And Frank was starting to get a pot belly at 26, and he's starting to become an alcoholic and drug addict and a sex addict. And he moved out of there, moved into my loft in Soho. He said, "Can I live with you?" And I said, "Right." And he had he had a midlife crisis at 28 because he had gotten to the place where he would have been and I said, "So Frank, you got a real choice here." And he said, "I do." I said, "You don't have to keep doing this. He pays, you're not a slave. He's paying you really well. So you got money in the bank. You've had no expenses for the last year. You've banked all this money. You can go to Europe. Let's go to Europe, right?" And so we did, right? And we jumped on the good old Freddie Laker, went to Heathrow, got a Euro pass, and we went all over Europe. It was springtime. And Paris is beautiful in the springtime. And I told, Dalie, Frank's having a change of heart. He goes, "Yes, I know. I felt it." And his painting wasn't up to snuff. And, all the things I had him do, I couldn't hawk his mind. So he goes, "Good idea, take him. And take this other one with you." And so I took them with me, and we had a great time. And the other one realized that this is the world they wanted, and this was the cost to take. And if she stayed at it, she would become a well-known and very successful artist in her own right in 4 or 5 years. And this is like the apprenticeship, to realize the real essence of it. And so we went through all of these galleries, all of these museums in France and in Brussels and England and Germany and Italy and Spain and Portugal. And she was the art historian. Frank was studying to be an engineer. He just had amazing talent and this unbelievable passion for Dalie. And she knew, she was brilliant, and she knew every artist and everything. So it was great. We went to all these places, and I had like this little letter from both of my mentors, who were art, you know, bigwigs, and from the Met and the Whitney and the Museum of Modern Art, and a letter from Dalie. So we had pretty interesting access to everything. And they called up people, and we stayed. We stayed in a few hotels, but we mostly stayed with people in their beautiful houses in these cities. And I tried to say, Frank, this is the life you can have. And the girl got more and more reignited and happy, and gonna really go back and really catch on fire and really, really work hard. And he just drank more and just thought everything was corrupt and everything was terrible and everything sucked. And he just wanted to die. His passion, the thing that he believed in. And I tried to that first night to say, buddy, you're going to go through the looking glass here, and every preconceived notion you ever had is going to be broken, and you have to let go of this, because he wasn't just passionate for Dalie, he was passionate for what he believed that meant. And I said, you have to let go of that. And he didn't even understand. He was just so elated, so high from being, having Dalie talk to him, one-on-one, and but it only took about 5 months for him to start to really not like what he was doing. And the other girl also had this, feeling of that. But once she went to Europe and saw all this stuff, because she'd never been to Europe, she studied it in university and knew everything out of books. But when she saw the real deal, and then she met people who had, were restoring this stuff, who were real super duper art historians in museums and galleries. I mean, she, because that was her other thing. She didn't hit it big as a painter. She knew that she'd have a real career doing that. And she was really getting off on meeting all these people, making connections. And Frank was not making any connections. So we came back, and, basically, Frank couldn't, he said, I'm going to go back to engineering. I'm going to go back and work at Grumman and make bombers that will drop hydrogen bombs on the world and we'll all die. And, I tried to, I went back with him to Long Island. I used to go visit him when I try to, go through Islip where he was, and, get him and throw him in a car and take him out to my beach house. And he lost whatever zenith he had for life. And then he had cancer when he was a boy, and he got it again and died at 35. And that is, and Dalie and I talked about that, and, I understood all of that. The thing is to live your life in the moment, every second. And that was the amazing thing that Dalie, if you were going to call him an artist or a master, he was a master of being his best Dalie self, even though it was made up and it was fictitious and it was a lie and it was, the zenith of corruption, of culture. He was the best at it. And you can't say, at least I can't judge him or say he's, it's a scumbag or something like that, because he really, it's like me. Don't believe a word I say. He was exactly what he was, And he was his best at doing that. And he created a body of work that's, very few people can make, And so that is the story of Salvatore Dali and Al and Frank and the art world, And it's still all that. It's still, art for art's sake, money for God's sake. And every year it just keeps doubling down on that, Let's see what you guys have to say about what I've just been going on about. Let's see. Again, I have to get up. I'm not getting up. 1, 2, 3, 4. Here it is. Remove. Remove. Hey there, fish. There's another one. So pretty much everybody here has been trolls. Yep. Well, how'd you like that story? 1 hour and minutes. 10 o'clock. 04. So here we are. So that was, 1970s, 1980s, 1990s. And now we have a whole different aesthetic, right, in front of us. And it's like, what the frack is going on? Basically. And here is someone who might tell us. Let's see. Terrifying crystal caves. We'll go back to David.
Try this 6-second method tonight to reverse type 2 diabetes. Most people continue to take blood sugar medications because they've been brainwashed by the medical establishment to believe diabetes is a hereditary condition, even though new studies are showing this to be completely false. If you or a loved one is suffering from diabetes, pre-diabetes or high blood sugar levels, then this latest discovery could change your life.
Well,
Can't grant me freedom. No one can grant me freedom. I am freedom. It's what I am. And the big question, what would consciousness do? What would consciousness do in this situation? And when we ask that question, it really just changed the way we see the world. Not what would I do, mind, or what would consciousness do? This is a great line. If it's not right, don't do it. If it's not true, don't say it. And what would transform this world overnight is if we started doing what we knew to be right in the situations we face, instead of what we think is right for us in the moment. What is right what is just in this situation. If we started making decisions based on that, the world would transform overnight. These are very simple things. If we want a world of peace, then we need to be peaceful. We don't need to fight for it. We just need to be peaceful, and we'll bring that about. If we want a world of kindness, we need to be kind, and then it will naturally unfold. We don't fight for kindness. As Martin Luther King said, it's a wonderful saying. Cowardice asks the question, is it safe? Expediency asks the question, is it politic? Vanity asks the question, is it popular? But consciousness asks the question, is it right? And there comes a time when one must take a position that is neither safe, nor politic, nor popular, but one must take it because it is right. And when enough of us do that, what is right will manifest by definition. And we're in this position now where this vibrational change, this energetic change is taking place, when we can start becoming the full magnitude of who we are, where we can be consciousness in the now, using mind to experience this reality instead of being governed by it, turning the key to let consciousness in. We're being offered this opportunity now. No longer can we say we didn't realize who we are, we didn't know we could do that. And that's what we're being offered the chance to do now, to turn the master key called becoming conscious that will bring an end to this. It's being given to us, we just need to take it. And to take it, we need to say enough. Enough of being enslaved by these people, enough of being enslaved by our manipulated ignorance, enough of being enslaved by the fear of being who we are. It is time to fly. It is time to fly.
You got that, guys? Thank you, David. Thank you, David. He's a man. He's been at this for 40 years. First 20 people, they just called him a nutter, made fun of him, dissed him. He's a brave man. He's an honest man. He's a great man. And you should get David Icke. Should get. He's probably got 15, 20 books, right? And my good friend Joseph P. Farrell is in the hospital. Let's say some prayers for Joseph right now. Father Sky, Holy Spirit, Mother Earth, hear our prayer. All of those who are now just and right and doing their best at helping you allow everyone to see what's going on. What is a great gift that has happened to us these last years is that everyone has been given the red pill. The rest of the world for years was happy to take the blue pill and just see the illusion. But now the red pill has been forced on more than half of the world's population. And every day that group is growing bigger and bigger. And with that, we are seeing the illusion as it really is, a lie of ego. Our good friend and brother and great humanitarian Joseph P. Farrell is in the hospital. Let us send all our healing energy to him now. He's getting better. He was in a really bad way this week, but now he's getting better and better and better. And you should go read his books. Just Google Joseph P. Farrell, bingo. Amazon will throw you all his books at him. And David Icke, too. Go look at all the books. I mean, just, Amazon on their website, you would say, I want to look at that book, bingo. They'll give you the first 10 pages to read right there. And that is almost enough to know what that book is. Now, both those guys, Joseph P. Farrell is a real scholar, real historian. He's got more information in there than you could imagine, right? Whereas David is just this neuron of beauty and love and truth. And all of you folks here on the contract, that you all have jobs, you're all busy people, but you need to start reading books. You already you've taken the red pill because all of you have had trials and tribulations. None of you were born with a silver spoon in your mouth or a gold-plated spoon in your mouth. And even people who are, I mean, I went to school with people like that, and they were miserable. It's a human complaint. Because if you have a true heart, no matter what your socioeconomic background is, you know what's going on. And people who are a little poorer usually have to suffer what's going on. Whereas the only way rich people can truly, go through life is they get turned into a sociopath, right? And then other people who are in that scene stress themselves out so much that, when you're stressed, like every day, just stressed out to the point where, you're having a psychic break, for years, but you're still holding it together. That's when you die. You're what is the word disease? Dis-ease, right? Why did I, at the age of 64 or whatever I was, 64, 63, I died of 10 years of the being around all these stressed out corporate people. Now, I wasn't stressed, but I was, I provided a skill set to them that they found very valuable and they paid me really well. And I did not instead of working 60 hours a week for 365, I worked 11 weeks of the year, for 4 days or 5 days or whatever it took it never took me more than a week, right? And I never, whenever I showed up at a lawyer's office, I was just a negotiator. All of the paperwork, all of that kind of stuff, all that, I was giving, 3 or 4 legal aides who knew the situation backwards, forwards. They knew every dot, every comma. That wasn't my job. My job was to get those 4 to 20 people to sign the contract, So my thing was more, psychological warfare, basically. And that was a, dharmic event that I experienced for, 10 years. And that's why I gained 240 pounds and why I died, at the age of 64, weighing 450, close to, I was over 400 pounds, right? I look like Mr. Creosote in the Monty Python, The Reason to Live, or whatever they called it, And they named all the, lust, avarice, gluttony, And I experienced that, right? And I didn't just eat, I didn't binge eat ever. I would eat the best of the best of the best of food at super duper restaurants with amazing service. And we would just eat and eat and eat. One time we went out to this amazing restaurant and we went there for lunch and then we came back for dinner. And I asked the guy when we were there at lunch, I said, so can you, do you have the caloric values of everything I ate? So many grams of this equals so many calories of that. I said, yeah, we do have that. I said, so we're coming back for dinner. And, the boss there is giving your protege the menu we want. Can you tell me how many calories I ate for lunch and how many calories I'm going to be eating for dinner? And he said, yep, no problem. So came back. He slipped me this paper when we were having appetizers. And for lunch, we almost had 30,000 calories. For dinner, we were going to have close to 40,000 calories. And I ate it. I didn't say, oh my God. I just, oh yeah, okay. But I did not eat after that. We went out and drank at a titty bar. So I did that for 10 years. And I do not, John would say that was, terrible. That was a sin. That was, all the worst of the worst. Nah, not really. I enjoyed every mouthful. I enjoyed every lap dance. And those girls, they weren't like junkies. They were going to college. They were getting, making 3 or 4 grand a night, doing that for guys like us. And, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. And like I said, I enjoyed every minute of it. And I never got a signal from my guides like, oh, you better stop doing that. I did have a few conversations with them where they said, everything has a cost. And now, I got, spent most of my life paying things forward. This is the first time I got all the, physical benefits first before I had to pay for them. And then I died and I had to pay for them. I had to, my body is right now, all the things, havoc that stuff caused and caused me to die. But I didn't die. And they didn't cut my legs off, and they didn't crack my chest, and I didn't get addicted to drugs, or I took their drugs for the first year to make sure I didn't die. But then I changed everything. I became disciplined. My diet, my exercise. And you don't have to huff, hundreds of pounds and run. No, you don't have to run. You walk, and you walk in like the circle I had around this property was one of the things that kept me alive. When I came back here in 2014, I, in that spring, after, I died in the winter months of that year. And then I stayed in the Keys being, recuperated after I succeeded in, getting over the finish line with the wire. And he let me stay at his really beautiful place in the Keys and paid for, he paid me my, what I wanted, and I put that in the bank. But he then paid almost that in taking care of me for 2 months in Florida, where, he kept a colonic therapist there. He kept an endocrinologist there. He kept a dietitian, an acupuncturist, herbalist, and, for 2 months, and we built a protocol on how to build back build back better. And I don't know about better, but built back to the place where I am now, where I lost 200 pounds and kept it off for 7 years, and it's not coming back. I'm still losing weight. Not like I did, but I'm still every week, every month, I'm lost a pound here, a pound there. And that's why I'm staying alive. That's why I look at, and, John, he put that really amazing video, that Christmas video of me, and I lost a third of that guy. I'm 2/3 of that guy. I was 300 something, and now I'm 210, right? So you can do that, and you do it by being your best. And all of us represent, what's going on in the world around us, and that's why when I think Anthony, didn't you manifest the term about John being the people's saint of whatchamacallit, of truth, right, Anthony? That was you. You did that, or I'm pretty sure it was you, right? Well, you hit it. If that was you or somebody else was, you hit it nail on the head, right? So, Jane, did you get that whole story? Did you hear David Icke? Let's see what else I can play for you guys. Because it's, only 10:30ish. And I've only been on for an hour and 30 minutes. Do-do-do-do. Boom, 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 boom. Here we go.
Who investigated and put Clay Shaw on trial for the JFK assassination and was disrupted by the CIA, and the media really destroyed him, who was immortalized in the Oliver Stone film. And Oliver's going to come up tonight as well. There's something really interesting about this because what I want to say about Garrison's role is that when he was knocking into things during his investigation, he was knocking into aerospace. And in the beginning, he didn't actually understand what that was. He came to understand it and put it on the record. But it is a dramatic piece. And I've done now a couple of documentaries on this case. Agent Oswald, CIA Patsy, is the central piece about the CIA setup of Oswald, and they're working with him for
Lessons
years.
are here tonight.
For this crime. And it also gets into, the real media cover-up aspect. The other one that I did was called
Guy Talking,
the UFO File
Dark
Assassins.
Journalism.
That has the Kennedy murders, and it has the greater Lockheed Martin role. You have to understand when you go into the assassinations and when you go into the political aspects, you're going to find yourself staring face to face with hidden aerospace over and over again. That's what I learned. And so I found when people were really good experts, some of these deep state researchers, they're so good, and they make the UFO field look ridiculous because in the UFO field, it seems like all they want to do is have a campfire with the CIA and pray that the CIA will give them disclosure so they can go on, CBS News and talk about it. So you got a really pathetic field on the UFO side. I want to mention the UFO side in relation to this political aspect and the secret space program, because that's the angle that we come in on with this, because that's where the research leads, in fact, right up to the relationship that JFK had with James Forrestal, who was the first defense secretary. And he was killed because his knowledge of the UFO file. You cannot get around that UFO piece when you're dealing with this deep state assassination part, because very often what we're looking at is deep state assassinations. They have full capability to guard certain secrets. The UFO file is the big secret, and not simply because it relates to an alien presence, although I'm sure that's a big piece of it. They're trying to promote that now. But it is the X technology that resides inside the UFO file, and this is the crucial aspect, because it represents a technology that could give someone else an advantage and therefore threaten their position and their kind of hegemony over the globe and beyond. So there are aspects inside that UFO file that I've referred to as apotheum, which are kind of physical, it's like a physics reality distortion field. And this gets into that deep aspect. And we're going to find that this is absolutely documented if you know where to look. And we're also going to find that somehow when you get around the JFK assassination, or if you get around Oswald, or if you get around Bell Helicopter, you're surrounded by the aerospace industry. You're surrounded by the former Nazis, and you're surrounded by the UFO file. This is what Garrison learned and, was very confused by in the 1960s, because he realized, okay, I'm dealing with this major aspect that has to do with aerospace, and I can see the CIA influence. But what's this? Why is it when I go to show up at Oswald's job that he supposedly was claiming he was going, which was Riley Coffee Company was the job, that Oswald claimed, well, I'm going to NASA. This is what he was telling all his friends. I got this great job at NASA. And all of his friends who were working there at Riley Coffee Company ended up being part of the aerospace industry, mostly through NASA or Lockheed Martin. And this is the remarkable thing. It also happens when we get into the JFK assassination piece. We'll find whenever they've reopened the investigation, and there have been 5, whenever they get around it, there's a list of deaths associated each time. Originally with the Warren Commission, and it's a very interesting.
Renew and refresh the home you love with the help of Certapro painters. Painting inside or out, you can trust the proven
Dear sisters and brothers, we are slaves. We are being exploited in every possible way. We live under an economical system that transfers the wealth from the people to the pockets of the elites. Sadly, most of the population are still unaware of how the 1% are looting the rest of us. It's for this reason that in this video, I will reveal few of the many ways in which the New World Order elites are discreetly extracting our wealth.
Yes, and the fact of the matter is that there's a refusal on both the Democratic and the Republican side of the aisle to acknowledge the mathematical problem, which is that the United States of America is being extracted. It's being extracted through banking, it's being extracted through trade, and it's being extracted through taxation. And there's not a single politician that has stepped forward, Susan, to deal with this.
We could live in a world where the countries could issue their own money, free of interests, but instead, a private banking cartel, through wars, threats, bribes, and murders, have taken over the issuance of currency, turning money into debt, and demanding it to be paid back with interests. That means an important part of the taxes you pay wouldn't need to be paid if your government could issue its own money free of interests. It's expected that in the next 10 years, United States will have to pay more than $4 trillion in interests. Can you imagine all the things that US could build with all this money? The interests are the weapon that bankers use to steal our wealth and bankrupt our nations. In the past, 2 US presidents, Kennedy and Lincoln, gave the power to issue money to the Congress, but they both got killed and their reforms voided.
Got all this stuff. The Fed just shouldn't exist. You believe the same thing. Make the case.
Well, for the first reason is it's not authorized in the Constitution, so it's an illegal institution. The second reason, it's an immoral institution because we have delivered to a secretive body the privilege of creating money out of thin air. If you or I did it, it would be called counterfeiters. So why have we legalized counterfeiting?
Central banks are private, corrupt, and non-transparent institutions who use their power to issue money to enrich themselves and their close friends. Why should society give the power to create something as important as currency to a private institution which is accountable to anyone? Isn't that stupid? Let's see what kind of things occur when you let this happen.
Well, I have a copy of the Inspector General Act here in front of me. It says, among other things, that it's your responsibility to conduct and supervise audits and investigations relating to the programs and options of your agency.
That's correct.
So I'm asking you if your agency has, in fact, according to Bloomberg, extended $9 trillion in credit, which, by the way, works out to $30,000 for every single man, woman, and child in this country. I'd like to know, if you're not responsible for investigating that, who is?
We have responsibility for the Federal Reserve's programs and operations audits, to conduct audits and investigations in that area. In terms of who's responsible for investigating, would you mind repeating the question one more time?
What have you done to investigate the off-balance sheet transactions conducted by the Federal Reserve, which, according to Bloomberg, now total $9 trillion in the last 8 months?
I'll have to look specifically at that Bloomberg article. I'm not. I don't know if I have actually seen that particular one.
That's not the point. The question is, have you done any investigation or auditing of off-balance sheet transactions conducted by the Federal Reserve?
At this point, we're conducting our lending facility project at a fairly high level and have not gotten to a specific level of detail to really be in a position to respond to your question.
Have you conducted any investigation or auditing of the losses that the Federal Reserve has experienced on its lending since last September?
We're still in the process of conducting that review. Until we actually, go out and gather the information, I'm not in a position to really respond to the specific question.
So are you telling me that nobody at the Federal Reserve is keeping track on a regular basis of the losses that it incurs on what is now a $2 trillion portfolio?
I don't know if you're telling me that you're mentioning that there's losses. I'm just saying that we're not, until we actually look at the program and have the information, we are not in a position to say whether there are losses or to respond in any other way to that.
Mr. Chairman, my time is up, but I have to tell you honestly, I am shocked to find out that nobody at the Federal Reserve, including the Inspector General, is keeping track of this.
Another way in which the central banks extract the wealth of the people is through controlling the monetary policies, through regulating the ease of credit, the money supply, the interest rates. The banks can create periods of expansion and recession, and it's during this economic downturns, when most of debtors cannot pay back their debts, and have their assets confiscated by the banks. That's one of the reasons why during recession.
Yep. So, as the red pill gets deeper and deeper into the population and people see what's going on, these are the things that you're going to see: inflation, and you're going to see, banking collapses, and 1986, 30,000 banks collapsed, and out of that chaos grew 9 banks. That's all we have in America, 9 banks. That's why they're too big to fail, right? That's what happened in 08, too big to fail. But now the extraction of wealth is so humongous, right? And, that we were in that same position in 2000 when the dot-com bubble happened in 99. And what did we have? 9/11. So what do you think we're going to have this time? And I am thinking there's going to be a non-nation state attack on our infrastructures, and then we're going to have a alien invasion, right? Hollywood version, right? And it's going to be interesting, And I don't know what's going to happen to your Sensei Al Bob here, and that's why I'm doing the shows. I could just, go off planet. And I'm here to say, come on, guys, wake up. You've taken the red pill. So 2022 is going to be. You thought 2021 was strange. You thought 2020 was strange. 19. You thought when Donald Trump was elected in 2016, and all those 4 years, the insanity that occurred, all it did was create a sociopathic modality for the population to follow. But a good portion of the population is not following it. Right? They've taken the red pill. They see what's going on. Now, I was given the red pill back in 1950 when I was born, right? So, and I've died 6 times. So what can happen to me but die, right? And I have many skill sets that I will just be, brought into the fold, right? And, I've been on the inside before, so I just won't eat the way I did last time. And I had my effect on them, just like I'm having an effect on you guys, right? And And, they talk about global warming, but what's really going to come is the ice age. That's what I'm feeling right now. Boom. Two people left, Jane and Anthony. But I make these tapes for posterity, kind of. Okay, let's try this. Let's see if this is what we're looking for.
Kroger delivery is always fresh because we check our produce at every stop.
Calling in an airstrike before this escalates any further.
For God's sake, don't touch it.
Dad, what's wrong with the telly?
Good evening. Allow me first to apologize for this emergency channel. I do, like many of you, appreciate the comforts of the everyday routine, the security of the familiar, the tranquility of repetition. I enjoy them as much as any bloke. But in the spirit of commemoration, whereby those important events of the past, you be associated with someone's death or the end of some awful bloody struggle, are celebrated with a nice holiday, I thought we could mark this November the 5th, a day that is sadly no longer remembered, by taking some time out of our daily lives to sit down and have a little chat. There are, of course, those who do not want us to speak. Just let me think. Even now, orders are being shouted into telephones, and men with guns will soon be on their way.
It's time to set.
Damn it! Why? Because while the truncheon may be used in lieu of conversation, words will always retain their power. Words offer the means to meaning, and for those who will listen, the enunciation of truth. And the truth is, there is something terribly wrong with this country, isn't there?
You designed it, sir. You wanted it foolproof. You told me every television in London.
Cruelty and injustice, intolerance and oppression. And where once you had the freedom to object, to think, to speak as you saw fit, you now have censors and systems of surveillance coercing your conformity and subjecting your submission.
Cameras.
How did this happen? Whose blame? Well, certainly there are those who are more responsible than others. They will be held accountable. But again, truth be told, if you're looking for the guilty, you need only
Look in the mirror.
I know why you did it. I know you were afraid. Who wouldn't be? War, terror, disease. There were a myriad of problems which conspired to fear got the best of you. And in your panic, you turned to the now High Chancellor Adam Sutler. He promised you order. He promised you peace. And all he demanded in return was your silent, obedient consent.
Inspector, you're almost through.
Last night, I sought to end that silence. Last night, I destroyed the Old Bailey to remind this country of what it has forgotten. More than 400 years ago, a great citizen wished to embed the 5th of November forever in our memory. His hope was to remind the world that fairness, justice, and freedom are more than words. They are perspectives. So if you've seen nothing, if the crimes of this government remain unknown to you, then I would suggest that you allow the 5th of November to pass unmarked. But if you see what I see, if you feel as I feel, and if you would seek as I seek, then I ask you to stand beside me 1 year from tonight, outside the gates of Parliament, and together we shall give them a 5th of November that shall never, ever be forgotten. kerosene fog. He's using our smoke machines.
Do you see what I see?
Follow me.
What do you see? Do you see what I see? What do you see? Do you see what I see? What do you see? Yep, dark journalist. Any relativity to the focus musician? Well, there's always a general. Everything is related to everything, Just remember, you've taken that red pill. If you're watching this channel, you've taken that red pill. It'll all become quite clear to you relatively soon. The only way you can deal with this is to be your better self. Don't have to have a gun. Don't have to go revolutionary. Don't have to be violent, And people who are truly confused go to violence right off the bat, because it's that fight or flight syndrome, right? And they only use dogmas to kind of keep them in control. That's what religion is, to keep you in control. But all you have to do is do your best. Be your best. Do your best. You don't have to be perfect. And, yeah. And famous people are just like everybody else, They crap in the toilet. They put their pants one leg at a time, They aren't any special. The only thing that they have done is been passionate about something to the point where they focus. They have that conscious intent and they focus on it. Mortal souls in a eternal consciousness, yes. What's cooking, good looking? Oh, what's cooking? We're having a good time here. Little Debbie's for tea, my dear. Yes, little Debbie zombie cakes, So I want you to, in every day and every way, go into that, what Jane was talking about there, that spirit of energy, that mortal. It's not, the soul is just, the server in your Akashic record. Your spirit is what you are. You are spirit, not a soul. A soul is part of the illusion. It's, like I said, just a server. It connects your mud puppet through all of your chakras, the 6 in the coarse mud and the 6 above. And there's this golden thread that runs the whole way through, all the way up to that. It's like a fiber optic line up to the server in your Akashic record. Your Akashic record is just that, a record of everything you ever did. So, zombie little Debbies. Yep. What's little Debbie saying? I want more, more. Give it to me harder, harder. Chinese in Africa. I hope they're better than the English in Africa. I think they might be. I keep a very close eye on that technology. Who's making what? Where is it going? Who has, And the United States is spending $700 billion on book for defense, right? Russia spent $60 billion. China spent $100, or less than that, $90. So what do? They actually have specifics. They only build X, Y, or Z weapon system that will harm the American military might, right? So, but they don't, the Russians and Chinese don't have 11 aircraft carriers because those are tools of imperial hegemony, right? Not really fighting a war, right? And Whereas, Russia has a number of new anti-missile and anti-aircraft and air superiority hypersonic missiles, right? They have a number of hypersonic ICBMs that can steer themselves, right? So we spent trillions of dollars building, Star Wars, and they spent a few billions to make one or two weapon systems that, can, go around that, right? But at any point, see, the United States is a country. It's not the United States. It's the how do you describe Anglo-American Khazarian hidden hand, right? And it's not any one country. It's not. It's a transnational. Even Russia and Chinese are part of this. It's like Russia and China are just the loyal opposition, and the real enemy is the population. And so, they're in a short time they're going to. It'll be necessary for all of these folks to have a nuclear exchange, not a nuclear war exchange, and those weapons will be fired on to their own people, meaning whatever nuclear weapon falls on the United States will be delivered by the United States. Whatever nuclear weapon falls on China or Russia will be delivered by China and Russia to their own people, because that is the dilemma we state. I mean, that is you've been sucking on that red pill long enough, you will start to see this come up. I got paid 30 years to look at these long trends. I was given access to information that basically you could see the shadow, the outline of what was coming. And that's what's coming, And the only thing that can offset that is not, like, our Prince of, the people's saint of truth. Please, Jesus, save me, Jesus, save me, Jesus. It's like that comic TV cartoon character. There was this character. There was this guy who was like a time traveling Mr. Professor, and there was always this, I don't know what kind of, it's like Bullwinkle, but not really. But he'd always, oh, save me, Professor Time Traveler Dude. Oh, he never, was aware of what was happening to him. He never gave it a thought. He was totally engulfed in, consumption of belief and convenience, Save the term was save me, Mr. Wizard, save me. And that is what the people's saint of truth, you see him on the video. He's always saying, oh, Jesus, save me, save me, save me, save me, Jesus. In the Bible, it says, God helps those who help themselves. And there are enough people out there who are, being true to themselves, being honest, being their better self. And that's why we're still here. I mean, why I doubled down on hedonism in, the early O's was that, I didn't have any understanding that, I thought the world was going to end tomorrow. There was, I had access to so much information that was just pointing that we are going to be toast any minute, right? And we may. But if enough of us are being our best and paying it forward, and being that loving heart and not that monstrous ego, then we're going to get through this. And when we get to the other side, that's when we're going to realize that we live on a planet of abundance. We are in heaven already. We don't have to make any deals with any middleman to get into the gated community. We're already here. So it's up to you guys, and me, meaning that's why I do this show. John keeps going, oh, you should do this, this, and this, and you'll be viral, and you'll have thousands of dollars, and da-da-da-da. And, I was watching, his exes, who, like I said, she makes between $3,000 and $70,000 a month, and she is, tapped out. She's, I don't know if she's bankrupt, but she's, having trouble. Me, I live on $400 a month, and I don't buy anything, so I don't owe anything. I don't have a credit card. I just cashed it in, gave up everything, right? And I live in the woods, right? And now I'm here trying to help our good friend, because he has that line, beautiful, sweet, innocent child, kind and generous monster, right? And the monster is not him. It is this ego maniacal, mercantile ego, and that has been generated by materialism. And stuff ain't bad, but when you have it as your religion, that's when it's a problem. Help me, Mr. Wizard. Yep. And I had a number of friends when I lived in Ireland that would say, because I hung out with the old crone, and she had all these friends who, were in time to, there were these little villages all over Ireland that had alleys. Like you went into the village, and like John had his laptop out, and he had to find where she lived. Where does she live? Where does she live? And when he was showing me Google Earth of Western Ireland, it was no longer the place that I lived in, because Skibbereen was a county seat that was like this little circle of a town, and they had no roads, no nothing, no industry. They had businesses, mom and pop stores, about 15 of them, and they had when I got there in 1988, Germany was putting in a supermarket there, right? And that was it, right? And when John took me into Google Earth and I saw what that city, it was just, all of these, cul-de-sacs, a bit of corporations, of like iron steel buildings that, moved things here and there and built this, that, and this. And there was a big interstate that went right through that little town that I knew, that only had a little road that went up the coast. And that little road was gone. The interstate was further in. And so you couldn't really tell. And the Google Earth was so two-dimensional, so linear. It showed no hills. And you couldn't really see the lakes. And I couldn't tell anything about that. I found Glendora, I found Skibbereen, but it didn't look like the same Ireland. And so I couldn't, oh, there she is. And that is, another pointer of, and every, when I went there in 2005, all the kids, they had their smartphones and their video games and the Gordon, Jordache, whatever clothes, they no longer look like Irish people. They look like folks in New Jersey and Maryland and out at the mall. And it was really, and they were all, totally blue pilled, right? And they had, jobs like, secretaries and cashiers and working on the line, and the big corporations, they did not even get a taste, but they got the crumbs. And they didn't know what they lost. And in America, we have lost, if we ever had democracy, it's definitely gone now. And that's a good thing, because the democracy we lost was an illusion that only supported the wealth of white gentried men and kept women as property, and people, the other, as a slave, And the Irishman who came over from Ireland from the potato famine was more or worse slave than the African American, because the African was purchased and was valued And so in a certain way, it's like your car. You wash it, you put in good gas. The slave was semi-taken care of. And like in Mississippi, there were 90,000 white landed people in Mississippi in 1850. And there were 6 million black slaves. So they had to keep the black folk somewhat happy because, and that's why the Second Amendment was there. The Southerns only signed on when they were allowed to have their own, meaning each of the plantation owners had their own militia. And it wasn't to fight off the English. It was to keep the slave in line. And our history is very vivid, very well documented, but no one wants to see it. No one wants to know that, from the time Christopher Columbus came to Hispaniola, which was Haiti, from that time, 1492, until, today, 600 million indigenous people have been murdered. 600 million. Not the 6 million the Nazis did, not the, 50 million that Stalin did, not the 100 million that Mao did, not the 2 million that Pol Pot did, and you can go on and on and on, but 600 million. Yes, over 500 years, 1492, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. Yeah, 600 years. 600 years, give or take. And still going on. And in reality, our country is less violent, less murderous, less, of all those things. We're made to be scared of where we are. I mean, 1970s, New York City was like this off the friggin' hook, right? But it was great. As an artist, it really gave you a lot of two things. People weren't looking at you and or me being an artist, and it gave you a lot of motivation. You had a lot of inspiration around you watching all the shit that's going on, and you could do just whatever the heck you want. I could do anything I wanted, to a certain degree. But I mean, Alan Sarrett, this guy, sculptor, you can go Google him. He had got himself, through me, a used Con Edison truck with a bucket, right? And we were both working at this, where we cast Joe Battle Foundry, and we cast. I was a metalizer. It's like spray painting metal. It's a very interesting. And it was a process developed in the 1890s, and pretty old technology, so no one uses it anymore. But we casted statuary, bronze and other metals. And Alan was in it, and he was a sculptor. And so we both worked there, because Joe Battle was just one crazy mofo. And the best, he was like in Charles Dickens, and Larry was the best employer ever. Every Christmas we had that was Joe. He was just off the hook kind of great guy. And he survived Vietnam. And he was a medic in Vietnam. He was a surgeon. He saved people's lives surgically right there in the field, because he took it on to himself to, work in a hospital in country, see the process, and then he did them out there before the guys got in the helicopter so they wouldn't die getting to the hospital. And when he was in country, he invented a number of medical tools like forceps and clamps and different things. That, he's a smart guy. He was going to college. He took those things and he patented them when he was, in the country. He sent, he wrote it all up, sent it to his brother, who was a patent lawyer, and that guy, patented them. And so when he got out of military in 77, he, his brother had a lot of money waiting for him, and a lot of respect. So he started this foundry, and the first thing we made were more exotic surgical tools. And then we, half of us were artists, so we started doing artwork. And then we did industrial work too, bridges, and that's what like we were going to spray metalize, the Woolworth building was falling apart. And we were going to let them structurally fix it. And then we, instead of replacing the terracotta that would, break down in another 20 years, we were going to spray metalize the whole friggin' building in bronze, right? You know how that would look? Amazing, right? And there were so we were bidding, right? And we took one of those things, motorized, uh, you know, platforms that guys wash windows, and they put the hooks up on the roof and have a motor, and it lowers them down. Well, we developed a machine based on that. We took one of those devices and put a rail on it, and then put a spray metallizing gun on it, and we put all the equipment you needed to do that behind it, and this thing just went and the thing would drop down. It was all automatic. You had two guys on there to feed the machine and to make sure nothing screwed up. And it had all kinds of sensors. It was measuring the depth of the spray and making sure it was like uniform. And it was run by a computer. And the computer had a CAD of the whole building. So the computer knew exactly where it was spraying. And this was in, 77. And so we went there. We were one of the companies that were bidding on it. And basically, we said this would take us all of 6 months to do, and it would cost $12 million. And you'd end up with a bronzed building that we guaranteed you wouldn't have to worry about maintenance for 90 years. We gave it a 90-year guarantee. It'll probably last forever, right? And all of the other companies basically cost, like this other company was going to put scaffolding around the whole building, take all the shit down, and then re-terracotta it all. It was going to take 5 years and cost $50 million. And it, and they did it. And, 12 years later, the building started falling apart again, right? But we were the cheapest, the best, and we gave a 90-year guarantee, right? And it was going to be bronzed, right? Like a statue, right? And they let us up there. We made the device, and we sprayed the worst side of the building that faced the worst weather. And we did that within 4 months of everyone getting the contract. The other guys took 2 years to just put in their bid. We put in our bid, and we showed what we were going to do, and we did like 10 floors. Joe patented that, and he made $1 zillion just on the process. But these guys didn't do it. And to this day, last time I was there, I went, and what was fun about that building, it was a real esoteric, it was the first skyscraper. It was like 40 stories tall in the 18, whatever, when it was built, tallest building in the world at the time. And they had all these parapets that were beautiful. And so when we, got the okay to put in a bid, they gave us keys to all of these floors, for all these parapets. And the first thing I did was, I went down to my key maker friend at Zelf's and copied the 300 keys, right? And so when we had to give them back, I had copies of all that. And it was because these parapets were gigantic. And you go up on the elevator, you walk the end of the hall, and there was this door. I had the key. We go in, close it. And in these parapets, they had tables and benches built in. And you sat there, and you were a good 20 feet from the edge. There was no banister or anything, but you knew that where that table and chair was, that's where you sat. You didn't go, 3 inches to the edge and look down. No, you stayed that 20 feet back. And the way it was designed, if you sat at these tables and these chairs and these benches on the other side, the wind never hit you. You were out; it would be snowing, and the wind wouldn't hit you. And so that was a great place to take a sweetie on a date. You bring a picnic basket, a bottle of wine, cheese, a nice loaf of bread, and maybe something else in there. And it was just over there, like 4 blocks on the other side of City Hall was where Chinatown was. And you walk through East Broadway and then cut up the Bowery, and bingo, there was Little Italy. So you had two of the greatest places to eat within 15 blocks from that building. So, it was, so I had all of that kind of stuff always around me that I could do and just have the best of times, right? And I had all these people like Carlton Haynes, I'd be his wingman. We'd go out to bars and hop in. He would, and the girls would flock to him like flies to shit. And the more interesting, more intelligent, when they got close enough to this guy and say, well, this guy's a jerk. And I'd be there and said, oh, let's go do something fun. So that is a time and a life that most people, but right now, and so people, oh, those things never happen. No, that's not true. My nickname of Perfect Timing was I left New York when it was doing this, right? All the rich were taking it over and buying it. And I went from New York to Ithaca. And Ithaca was a town that was amazing. Had Cornell and Ithaca College, and it was like at its heyday in the Gilded Age. So it had all these beautiful buildings all around that town, really great people, upstate New York, the Finger Lakes, really great. I spent 3 years. I'd still be there if it wasn't for the lake effect. And, I experienced the 3 best years of a 40-year period. And then I went from there to Asheville. And Asheville was this amazing town, and nobody was there. I spent 10 years there as the dude there with all these great people that we just did amazing art and social and cultural and just the funnest of fun things. And then it became the hipster jungle, and now it's probably one of the most toxic places to live. And people don't even know it. The drinking water there is like deadly. The air, there's 2 interstates, 40 and 26, that go right through the city. And 1 million vehicles, right? 300,000 diesel trucks go through there every single day. And the air is worse than any place in America because it's a real bowl and it doesn't have an ocean to blow into it. It gets no breeze. So between the deadly drinking water and the deadly air, and the deadly stupid people, and so I left there in 98, and I went up to Lynchburg and Rustburg and B-Town and Roanoke, and I was all around that, and it was deader than doornail. And I bought real estate. I had some money from all the things I was doing, and but not a lot. But I bought a 30,000 square foot building right in Lynchburg, right underneath one of the bridges. Forgot what there was, a 26 bridge or 29 bridge, the highway bridge, and then the town bridge, because the James River goes right through it. And I was right on the James River, right, not under. Well, half of the building was underneath that bridge, and there was a hum, but it wasn't like being under interstate. It was a town road, and it had this beautiful staircase. Lynchburg in a lot of ways is like the San Francisco of Virginia, because it's built right into a mountain. There's a river on one side and this big hill that goes up, right? And it's a town that's spread out all over the place. And there was nothing going on there. And Jerry Fall was just getting there. They had Onkyo and Motorola. That was a large before they moved all the cell phones to China. It was a big manufacturing thing. And Jerry bought up, billions of square feet of factory buildings and turned it into, Liberty University, and then made his way into being the head of the moral majority. So I bought that building for like under, 15 grand, and I sold it for like 6 times that, like 4 months later. because I got there just at the right time. It was still deader than a doornail, but Jerry was building his empire. He bought up all the property, and once he got the money behind him, that town went like that, right? So somebody came to me, and I just cleaned it up a little bit. I didn't do anything because I was thinking of building lofts and this and that. Some guy, I was talking to at the Waffle House, and he said, "Oh, show me the building." Right? So I showed him the building, and he goes, "So you want to sell it?" I said, "Depends on what do you want to pay for it." He gave me a number that I didn't tell him what I paid for it, but he gave me a number that was 6 times what I paid for it. And I said, "It's yours, baby. All I need is to be able to live here for I got my stuff here, and this is one of the places I crash, and I still have parties here, and wait till I'll be gone by next Christmas." And this was like March of that year, and so I had all the way till next Christmas. And he said, "No problem. I just want to buy it. I'm not going to do anything with it for at least a year. You could stay longer if you wanted." But I didn't. I moved on. But I stayed there. And again, I go into a place, I find something, I do something amazing and exciting and fun, and stir up a lot of people to do their best. And then if it doesn't catch fire, if it doesn't, if it isn't self-sustaining, I tell people, so, hey, we should, and if they don't step up and do it, but want me to do everything, I say, tie all the strings together and move on. And that's what I'm doing here in Roanoke, right? Because, I've been not supporting, but, I've been John's best friend, yeah, you can do it, you can do it, you can do it, you can do it, and he's still saying the same thing over and over again. He has made incremental little baby step better. He used to be, 70% evil creature and, 30% sweet, generous, kind guy. Now he's more like 52% sweet, nice guy and 48% evil creature, right? So, give him another 7-10 years, he might get almost to 80 or 90% the sweet guy who he is, and then have some kind of realization, and then step into what he really wants to do. But he will have wasted 50 years of his life going humming, humming, humming. But the American public, that's why John is the people's saint of truth, because they've been going humming, humming, humming up for 250 years. So, but there are enough people here doing their best, so we haven't, gone totally, in cages. But that's what the hidden hand really wants. It wants to kill off a good chunk of us. And like I said, I think there's going to be a nuclear exchange, but each country is going to nuke itself, right? So because then they can do it strategically to kill the people, but save the property, the investment values. So that's kind of where we're at. Can we, the Santa with the big farmer backs, can we, Santa, I don't know what that means, Jane. Fake news. Well, it's been fake. I mean, if you read Noam Chomsky's, Manufacturing Consent, it's been fake news since Ben Franklin. Soft white underbelly is amazing too. Yes, it's sometimes it's tasty, but most times not. On YouTube. Oh, it's okay. Yeah, I think I did see that. Yep. At Lynn C. Lynn C. Jane, today on Soft White, the Virginia family went to Walmart. Beautiful video. Okay, I'll have to take a look at that. So Jane is. Lynn C. Is that your channel? Soft White Underbelly. Is that your channel? Hive Mind. What's Hive Mind? Hive Mind is Hive Mind is when a event occurs that causes a gestalt or a trauma to permeate the population, right? It confuses them. It takes them out of their comfort zone. And then some time of tragedy occurs that is large, like at 9/11. That's a good example. And it causes the body politic to get, through fear, get behind a leader. It could be, anything. And look at the leader we had, Monkey Boy Jr. and Dickhead, right? And we let them totally bankrupt. We had 20 years of war. The military-industrial complex made something on the order of $600 trillion in that 20 years. And it went on to pay, on a credit card, and we are left holding the bag, right? And so that has forced us, into this hive mind of the blue pill. But it's gotten so wacko that we, even taking the blue pill, you can see the red pill world. And now everyone is seeing what's going on. And a number of the population is not, consenting, right? And if you look at our friend Awaken with JP, he's done some pretty amazing. He does some pretty amazing stuff. He is like the Will Rogers of our time, and he has a lot to lose, and he's going for broke to save. He's got some new kids that have come out, and he's like going, okay, yeah, I'm doing pretty good. Got this big house and big cars and all this stuff. But what do I just, roll over for the cars and the big stuff, or do I step up and do my best to help keep and create a world that my children can grow up and survive in and be happy? And that's what he's choosing. So go, but I'm going to have to go. Let's see. Where is my magic wand? Let's see. Okay. Do that. Do this. What am I? Where did my phone go? Oh, there it is. So let's see. Let us see. So this is called. Let's see. Soft white underbelly, right? Okay, that's the name of the show on Amazon. I'm going to go look it up, go straight to Mr. Google and say, soft white underbelly.
According to Artist Info, Medicine, band, aka Blue Oyster Cult. Soft White Underbelly was the original name of the band that would eventually become Blue Oyster Cult. The band consisted of future BOC mainstays Donald Roser, Albert Bouchard, and Al Lanier, along with vocalist Les Bronstein and bassist Andy Winters.
YouTube channel Soft White Underbelly. Oh, there we go. Mm-hmm.
I got an email from this company called Unison, and they were like, "Yo, check out this MIDI chord pack." I said, "Nah, I don't."
My name is Mark Leda, and I produce the videos that you see on my channel, Soft White Underbelly. I've been a photographer since I was 14, and I spent most of my career doing advertising work. So I'm basically helping wealthy corporations become even wealthier. And that became, that I realized as I got older, that was my legacy. And
didn't feel comfortable with that. So I wanted to do something that mattered more in the world. The name Soft White Underbelly came from Winston Churchill, who back in World War II was advising the United States on how best to attack Germany. And he called Italy the soft underbelly of Europe, meaning that was the most vulnerable spot that Germany had to come in from Italy. These videos are meant to create awareness of things that are broken in our country. If we don't look at some of these things, they're just going to continue to grow and get worse and worse. And I believe listening, understanding, accepting, and maybe deciding to do something differently might make a difference eventually and help the next generation or two of parents raise kids who have more hope, have better role models, have both parents in their lives. That's my hope. That's my aim with this work. It's not to help the addict that's outside my door. Even though I've done that many times. I've spent, over the last 10 years, I've talked with about 1,000 people, and financially, I've probably spent $150,000 helping people with tents, with you need shoes, you need clothes, you need food, you need a cell phone to call your parole officer, you need all these kind of things. Day after day after day, every time I'm down here, I'm bleeding money. But that's not what this channel is about. It has nothing to do with this channel. This channel is purely about what I just said, which is helping our society, helping our government figure out what's wrong with our country.
Well, I now have it on my stream, so I will look at it thoroughly. So, why JB dwell on hell in absence of divine love? Because his whole life has been, as he thinks, he's been punished. It's someone else's fault. He's experienced a trial. He was bullied as a kid. Something happened in his family. But, compared to, when I worked in really bad neighborhoods in New York, these kids that were running around that I would grab and say, no, you're not going to do that. You're going to come work for me as an electrician, and I'll give you a place to live, and I'll pay you $10 an hour, and I'll teach you a trade, right? Well, he had nobody to do that for him, right? And so even though he was just going to public school and, where he could have, if he wasn't so, nihilistic and self-centered and egocentric, but these are all pure, straight up definitions of nihilism, of neuroses, right? And untreated neuroses turns into psychoses. And then you have a trauma or two that occurs, something really, amazing, terrible. And then you have a psychic break and, you have multiple personalities. And that's all those, those, and then that turns into, sociopath turns into a psychopath. Now, John isn't any of that. He's just a neurotic person, and his parents had sheltered him, and he, they sent him off. They paid every bill. They sent him off. Did what, they said were told to do. So he went to college, got undergrad. He wanted to be a filmmaker. His grandparents were artists. His mother's an artist, so he went to be a filmmaker, a musician. They sent him to, grad school, really good, film place. And he did that. And, he met his ex, and she was at school there too. And she either, had a big plan. Oh, wow, here's a fish. I can reel this guy in. And so, that's his, the first girl he ever really had sex with, that he really had a connection with. And they were living together. And she, at a certain point, couldn't stand it. So she split after graduating, and he stayed there. And he couldn't, he felt that he was in exceptional, and that he had everything handed to him. So here he's in Hollywood where he has to compete. And he after however a year, 9 months, mean, everyone I ever knew who was like super duper famous, like Danny DeVito is a good example. He's a little guy from New York City, and went to theater school and art school, and Michael, what's his name, was the guy from Wall Street, where greed was good. That guy. It was his roommate, right? And now that guy came from rich Hollywood family, so he was pretty much safe. But Danny DeVito, not so much. So Danny DeVito, hung along with him and went, and so. But the first 10 years of their career, they were not. They were living in crappy apartments and doing commercials and then TV shows, and they get their big chance and go to California and get in a movie. Well, it took them. I mean, even though Michael, whatever his name was, came from his father's one of the biggest stars in Hollywood, he still had to put in 10 years of commercials and TV shows and before he got his first movie, and then he got crappy movies and then had to move up. Now, Danny DeVito probably had more because once he did Taxi, he was a star, right? Whereas the guy who worked in, he was in cop shows, not so much, but he was, getting his skill together and working towards it. And pretty much every actor I ever knew, really, they weren't like amazing from the first minute they showed up and they got the big contract and was able. No, they all had to work at their craft. And I had, so I was in the theater world for a good 15 years, and I acted, I directed, you name it, I did it. But mostly, I worked for these people who were the cream of the cream, and I was their best boy. I was their technical, I was their electrician, their electrical, theater, and the engineer, the designer of the lights, the system, all the above. And I always did my best. I never slid on anything. Nothing ever had to be redone. It was done perfectionly. And then when people would work under me, I would teach them the same way Bob Goddard taught me. And so they're all, Michael Moody, he ran Manhattan Theater Company. And he, so he was an apprentice, but then he got that job and just went up the thing because that's what I did all this other stuff. But that's how I got to be the master electrician at Carnegie Hall, because he worked for me, and then he became head of Manhattan Theater Club, and that was connected to Carnegie Hall. And something needed to be fixed in Carnegie Hall, and it was like the wiring there was so old and decrepit, and the ground, they virtually had no ground. So anything that went in there, like if they had wireless mics, forget about it. It had to buzz like you couldn't believe. And so no one could fix it. He was the head of Manhattan Theater Club, which that was they had another building where they had their offices and practice. They did in there, and they were part of that nonprofit entity that was Carnegie Hall, and all the music and everything. And everything just got worse and worse. And he was on their board, and he said, "We need to bring in Al." I came in, and everyone knew me, and a few banker dudes who really weren't in the theater or knew the theater. Right? He's only 22, And everyone said, "No, you don't understand. This guy's been doing this since he was 9. He worked for every amazing person in the industry. He's got, he's local free, Naboth, IATSE, At 24, he had that. He was a master electrician working on movies. No, he's the boy we need." So I did. Went in there, fixed it all up. And because all I did was forget all, try to fix the crap that was there. I just replaced it with stuff that really worked really well. And it was easy because I just went along the side of where the crap was and ran everything right, like tie wrap to it. And then, from the place where it came in, I made a super duper clean point of entry, and then super duper, points of distribution. And there was no hum, no dimming of lights, no, things not working, and I did it in 4 months with another band of youngsters that I taught to be, that now, I don't know, they're probably retired by now too, but I kept doing that. I just kept getting people who was stepped on their whole freaking life, and I gave them a chance, and I supported them, and I just kept, doing the right job, not blaming them, showing them, not letting them have an excuse or escape. And if they wanted out, no problem, go on. See you later. Good luck and bye. But not a single one of those 128 folk, youngsters, my godchildren, gave up. Never did. Because I didn't give up on them, they didn't give up on themselves. And that's why I picked them. And they all succeeded amazingly, beyond anyone else's imagination. If we all did that, we would have a problem. And I'm going to have to look at Mr. Underbelly, and because just what he said sounded righteous. And that's, like I said, that's why we're still here, because there's guys like that. He was in an industry, he was making really good money, and he was going, wow, this is all there is to life, and he realized it wasn't. And that's why I do these YouTubes and tell you stories, and don't believe a word I say. What do you feel in your heart when you hear this story? I'm not here to do, to become viral and A-lister. I've already been there, done that, I'm here to look for another, 1,000 godchildren. So let's see what you guys put on my glasses and see what you're saying. Whoops. Okay. Michael Douglas. Yep, that's the guy. And his dad was, what was Michael Douglas's dad's name? Who was in Spartacus, and that was a great movie. That was another movie by my favorite director, who did 2001 and Full Metal Jacket and Lolita and Dr. Strangelove and The Shining, Eyes Wide Shut. What was that director's name? Anyway. So a movie being made near me, working on a movie is like watching paint dry. I had this job as the ME, Master Electrician, for Woody Allen's, one Woody Allen movie and a few others. That was the big kahuna I worked on. And, it took about 4 months. I got paid $300 an hour. And all I did was, there was this truck with a gigantic, 700 kVA generator, which is enough juice to run a small little town. But it's, a lot of juice. It's the kind of juice you need for doing a movie with big Klieg lights, and it's enough juice to light up whatever you want to light up, right? And I didn't, I didn't work for the cinematographer. I didn't, I wasn't a guy who hung lights. I wasn't a grip. I was a master electrician. So all I did was show up there before anybody, put the truck there, run. And I had there were grips that helped me. There were 3 to 5 folk who would help get there early too. We'd run all the cables where, the distribution panels were that people could plug their lights and equipment into. And my major thing was to make sure this thing was grounded well, so there'd be no buzz, no intermittent anything, right? And I had a mechanic, he ran the genset. I just made sure nothing went awry, but he was the guy who knew what the diesel motor did. And, he drove it there. I showed up. I'd have coffee for him before the food people showed up, and we'd do that. And then the grips who would help us, showed up when the food people showed up. we go have breakfast together. The cinematographer and the producing staff would have like a blueprint of where they wanted the power, and we'd figure out how to run the cables so it wouldn't get anybody's way, and it would be where everybody wanted it, and we ran it, and it would take no more than an hour or two. And then I would stay there for 16 to 20 hours, getting $300 an hour. And if it went over 10 hours, I got $700 an hour. And it went over 10 hours every freaking day, right? So, I was making some serious money. But so there was 4 of us that had the same credentials, local 3 card, IATSE card, NABIT card. And I was the youngest, but I also had my master electrician's license. Those guys didn't have those. And they had been doing this for 20, 30 years. They were in their 40s and 50s, and they were like 900 pounds, and they already had 4 heart attacks. And they would just kept going back to work just to make that kind of money and just have that kind of life, and they did nothing. And I would talk to these guys. So when you were when you were younger, my age or younger, did you have dreams? Oh yeah, I was going to do this and do that. I said, did you ever do anything? No. Did you ever do anything? Oh, I really wanted to try. Did you ever do any trouble? No. And I'd tell them stories, and they would just be. And that's called having a life. They didn't have one, right? And because they weren't really rich, but they had a lot of money, their kids became, spoiled and stupid, right? So. I did that for a year, for that movie and 2 other movies. And I said, I want something else. And so the video thing that they now have, and they used to have rushes, meaning they take the film, they would immediately develop it, and then that evening the director would watch it. But now they have right along in the camera, they have a little thing that the video camera is attached to, and he can watch an immediate rerun right there and then, right on the video screen. And he can watch, it while it's being shot. He can play it back. They have other, because whenever a movie's made, they just don't have one camera. They have, a number of cameras, and they have and everything's wireless. Anyway, so when I said, I don't know if we really want to do it. Oh, no, you need to stay here. We need you. You're young blood. There's this new thing that you can do, and it's a video playback. And so I said, okay. And that's when I met Captain Louis, Mr. Sony, the grandson of Daddy Sony. And he was everything video. And he had his shop down on West Broadway near Chambers. And he all these buildings, and he had a little house, like 3 stories high. And it was a house. It was like back in the day of the Dutch. Really beautiful little thing. And in the back, they had where the carriage house was, where the horses were kept. It was like a big barn. And it was, done over a couple of times, so it wasn't a barn anymore, but it was a nice commercial building, heat and windows and light and everything. And that's where he had all his stuff. And so he was the progenitor of that technology. And so they sent me down with him. I kind of was his apprentice. And then we took that stuff to the second movie I worked on, and it was a real, car race beat, like an action movie. And so the playback was really good for them. And so then I could do both those things. And in the third movie, I was the Emmy and the playback guy, because I got that generator going and everything was fine. All I did was sit there. So I then went over and earned another $400 an hour by just pushing play, stop, rerun. And it had little counters, so I could tap right where you want. It was not a difficult job. And I was the first guy to do that, right, in IATSE. And then I wrote up a whole thing of like protocols on how to do that. And after that, they paid me a nice chunk of change for that. And so that 6-month period, I said, I just want you guys, is there anything I could put this in your business that I would get a really good return, like an investment? Oh, yeah. You don't want to, we'll give you $500 a week. I said, that's all I need, because I'm doing all this other shit. And I got a bag full of cash. And that's one of the times I went to Sweden and travel the world for a year because I had a bag of cash. I didn't have to work. I mean, I did fun things, and our people saint of truth. He always goes, work. I've been working so hard. I mean, like he told me that he had been working really hard today. I said, okay. And it's just, I just have to, I can't rest. And he can't rest. He wakes up too, early and just, humming. And that, someone said, why is, he's suffering or why is he talking about hell? Because he kind of lives in hell. And that's why Jesus, save me, Jesus. Like, save me, Mr. Wizard, And, and I was, every time I talk about anything like what I'm talking to you now, I'm going to hell, I talk about the women in my life. The only really one is that one, the one you were married to, and then your second wife, and she's waiting for you in heaven. It's like, no, I don't need to die and see her. I see her every day. When I meditate, she's in my Akashic record. She is down by the fireplace, warming herself, and she has this big, long coat of my owl feathers, right? And they're made from my tears when I cried when she died. Each one of those feathers that she wears is one of my tears. I see her every day, I don't have to wait till I die. There she is. We talk. We are sweet on each other. She loved peppermint ginger tea, so we have that. She liked soda bread, so we have that. Everything she likes is always there, right? Clotted cream, butter, and jam, and soda bread, and tea. So I have tea with her every day. So, it's not like, oh, I want to die. No. Mm-mm. And she didn't want me to die, because I did die, And she was at the party. She had a party hat on, but she was smiling, knowing that I was going back, And it's not like when I die, she and I will be there together because she's already reincarnated in somebody else, And so, but her essence, her spirit is there when I have tea, right? So her new, mud puppet is and it's connected to the server of the soul up in the Akashic record, and so anyway, that's how it's my worldview, my shamanic worldview, and I don't believe in anything, and I don't need to have you believe in anything I believe in because I don't believe in anything. All I have is faith in love's co-creation, right? Stanley Kubrick, that's the man, my man, Stan the man. Yep, 70s films. So did any of you guys ever see the movie Zardos? And it had, the guy who played the first James Bond, Sean Connery. And in the 70s and early 80s, Sean Connery was, he was in 3 or 4 Bond movies, and he was, to my mind, the Bond, right? The one that Ian Fleming wrote about. And the other guys were okay. They interpreted their own way. And that's art, right? And this guy who did the last 5 or 6 movies, he was really good, but he wasn't that James Bond. So anyway, Sean didn't want to get typecasted. So he, bailed from that. And in the 70s and the early 80s, he did some really amazing, Man Who Would Be King, Time Bandits, Everything You Know Is False. And that movie, it's not that name, but if you go look up, all the movies Sean Connery had and what it is, it's exactly what 9/11 was. This hidden hand entity went through mercenaries in South Africa and Israel and got together a crew of Arab folk who came from Saudi Arabia and hid in Afghanistan and got themselves a nuclear weapon from Russia and spirited it into America and was going to blow up the World Trade Center. and our boy Sean was playing a TV news guy who shot his own stuff. So he knew all the players, and he put it all together, and he was telling all his contacts and the FBI and the CIA and MI6. This was what was. Oh, you're crazy! You don't know. We don't hear. Because they were in on it, and that's when he realized that everyone's in on it. That there's this hidden hand. There is no nation state activists. All the wars, the Cold War, all of that was phony, and everything American did was really for this other hidden hand entity that had nothing to do with our government or our people. Didn't represent. And this was in the early mid 70s. Totally. So go find that movie. That one will blow your friggin' mind. And so, especially when they, you see the shadows of the hidden hand, and then you see the henchmen of the hidden hand, and they're all Nazis, right? So that's a very interesting movie. And he was in a movie called Zardos, and it was a movie about the near future, like 2120, right? And what has happened is humanity, the Nazis developed all this amazing technology. World War II, by 42 they were on the moon. By 44 they were on Mars, and down in the South Pole, and in Brazil and Argentina, and they controlled everything. They made wars, made chaos, kept everyone confused and separated and fighting each other, all the while taking all the money and building a breakaway civilization. And they were on the asteroids and out there. They, by 2000, by 1980, they had, they could go to anywhere in the universe in a snap of a fingers, and they, made themselves transhuman. The first time I heard that, so these people were humans, but they had tech inside them, so they live forever, right? And when the world just crashed out into a zombie apocalypse, because they had this energy vortex technology, they made these energy bubbles all around the world where the rich people lived. They were like, gated communities, and they made a religion, this flying head they call Zardos, and it would come down, and they had a like priestlyhood that were just gangsters, that they had guns, and everyone had no guns, and so those people had to eke out, grow food, and 80% of all that food went into baskets that went into the big head that would float up into the air and go over to the gated community and feed the rich people. And the rich people were there, and they were living, bucolic lives, like really beautiful, and everyone was young and beautiful, except over on the other side of the river, there were these, this house, big kind of old folks' home, and everything was being run by AI. Those people had lost total control to AI, and AI was taking care of them and running everything in a kind of chaotic, psychotic, sociopathic way, because it was programmed by chaotic, sociopathic, psychopathic programmers, and and that's and so it ran this thing for 100 years, but the rich people were in as much of a prison as the zombies outside, right? And if they complained, and just like now, if they said anything against Fauci or the jab or any of that, the punishment was they would be aged 5 years. And if they kind of whined about anything, they got aged another 5 years. And then if they didn't do exactly what AI said, which was for their own good, they were aged. And so all the guys who invented all of this tech and made this psychotic world, who were the psychotic guys, they were aged to a point of senility, but still aware enough to know what was going on, and then kept there for eternity. So you talk about hell. And that's kind of what John is, right? That's where John is at, right? And if you go look at those movies, all these movies by Sean Connery in the 70s and early 80s, they pegged exactly what's going on. It's just, especially the movie Zardos, and everything you think is true is false. And that's not the name of it, but it's close to it, so you can pick it out. But, Man Who Would Be King, and Time Bandits is another great one. And so in the 70s, when things were like falling apart, the arts went nuts. I mean, that's when, Clockwork Orange is another Kubrick amazing film. And they made a trilogy. They made a movie called If, Clockwork Orange, and Oh Lucky Man. So, or maybe it was If, Oh Lucky Man, and then Clockwork Orange. So I was in a film class at the New School, and all those movies were played. That's kind of where I saw them. And then we decided to uptown have a film festival, and we got on 69th Street. There was a really good art house, and these movies were like super cheap. No one went to see them, so the guy, oh yeah, sure, we'll do that. You can do that, and we packed it because we basically instead of selling popcorn, we sold balloons full of nitrous oxide, cocktails with ecstasy or something close to it, and lots of bottled water and Quaaludes. And that was the most interesting film festival I'd gone to. I mean, I remember in Clockwork Orange, there's that scene where the girl gets raped, and half the people were like horrified, and the other were sexually excited. It was like, and everyone overdid all of the party favors. Me, I just took, I'm the guy who doesn't, I'm Mr. Moderation. It's not like I didn't do it, just a little bit of this, but I love nitrous oxide. So I was, forget the balloons. I was like, the hose from the tank was in my mouth. And I had that was a great week, a very memorable week. And who was my girlfriend at that time? Was it Beth? Might have been Beth. But anyway, it was loads of fun. And where was I living then? I had my place downtown. In the Pearl Street power station. It was Edison's first power station, this real estate company I worked for. It was like a dump of a building, and we redid it in the ground floor, and it was like Pearl Street goes straight, like 2 blocks from the Pearl Street electric power station is Wall Street. And Wall Street goes this way, Pearl Street goes right into it, right? And it kind of cuts into West Street. Starts at West Street, comes around here, goes around to kind of almost goes back into West Street, but keeps going another block up towards Wall Street. So anyway, that's where I lived. And ground floor, so it was a power building. So, and no one used it after Edison left in like the 1902. And it just stayed empty, right? No one did anything. And this guy bought it for nothing in the early 70s when real estate was dead. And in the 80s or late 70s, it was the 80s, early 80s, before I met Don. After when we came back from Ireland, that's right. And I guess Jane Fire was my sweetie then. Yes, that was it. And so this guy, we renovated the whole building. Ground floor it just didn't lend itself to be condos. Ground floor was off-track betting. And then there were 3 more lofts, and then the belfry, right? And so off-track betting, marijuana. The guy who sold it, his name was High. He's a Rasta boy, High. And then the next guy was this nice Jewish boy, sold cocaine. And then the top floor was part of the Eddie. What was Eddie's family's last name? Not Murphy, but something close to that. White, Eddie White. the white family, who was like the big gangsters since, the 20s. They were the black, Italian mobsters up in Harlem. And they were selling heroin and crack. And so that was, the distraction building. And at the top was this amazing, these really sharp roofs, very, Victorian slate. And they had these big flywheels because they had the gigantic steam engine down below, and it had a big wheel, and they had these leather belts that went through the building, and they had generators all through it, and that's what sent juice out to different neighbors, within the 6 mile radius, from there up to Chambers Street, give or take. City Hall, Woolworth Building, they had started to put the subways underground, so it was there, or they were above. No, they were trolleys, electric trolleys, back in the 1880s, and so 1870s, and so they had all these big flywheels up there because then the belts went over to other generators, and they had these platforms where the generators were up there, and the whole thing was covered in axle grease, like just you just couldn't even walk without falling down. And that's why I know it. And there were pigeons up there. And I got that space. And it was an amazing space because it was, maybe 100 feet off the street level, because each floor was pretty tall. And the whole building was concrete, right? And that's another reason to stay there. It would cost too money to, take it down, right? So anyway, my friend Gary Blue, he was Mr. Spray Paint, Mr. Sand Floors, and polyurethane. And he was also into spraying polyurethane. So I brought him there, and I said, what do you think? And he said, you know what we're going to do? And I said, no, what are we going to do? He said, we are going to scrape up as much as this grease. I have this guy who cleans out oil tanks, right? And he's got a vacuum cleaner that would do a great job on this, right? And take 98% of all this shit away, still leaving stuff that's in the wood. And we can't sand it, because it would like start a fire and burn the place down. What we're going to do is take all of the stuff down to the wood, and then I'm going to just spray polyurethane, coat after coat after coat, and it'll be like a surfboard, right? And we're going to throw in I have this other stuff that's harder than polyurethane, but we do a coat of that to get a gloss down there, and then put this stuff that they use on surfboards and cars, and then a coat of the glossy stuff, and then a coat of this stuff, and then like 5 coats of the glossy stuff, and it'll be amazing because I'll make swirly patterns in what's left of the oil and bring out the thing of the wood, and then we'll just cover it up with like half inch of this, and it'll be like concrete, and it'll be great, and it'll be clean, and I'm gonna do it to everything, the floors, the walls, every place, every inch of this place. I'm gonna do this. And after it was done, it looked fucking amazing, because the wood came out of it in the most amazing way, and everything was shiny and reflective, and it was just amazing. So then they had all these things like vents, and we pulled them out, and actually we went to this window guy in Queens with one of these things. I said, you got any things this size that I want to replace this with a thermopane window? He says, well, up and down, no, but I actually do have something that's just a solid, nothing moves, nothing goes this way, it's just glass, thermoplane glass, right? And I said, sounds great to me. So there were, I don't know, almost 20 of these vents. And so we had 20 amazing windows that were pretty high up. So all the light came in. It was this dark dungeon on the top of the building now was this Gothic, mind-boggling bright thing. And I had a friend who's into stained glass. My dad was into stained glass, and my friend taught my dad stained glass, and so they made stained glass windows for that. I mean, that was a fun thing about my dad. He did shit like that, right? And but to get involved with him in business, Ooh. Yeah, that was like 16 level chess doing with my dad. So anyway, I had that place and I turned it into a healing center, right? And for all of the rich, I came home one day and I found this guy and he was on the steps and it was, like right on the speedball floor. And I took his pulse and it was thready and really almost non-existent. And he was like white, so this guy's almost dead, not quite dead. And so I threw him over my back in a fireman's carry, carrying up one more step, went into my place, put him on my massage table. And I had these two, like football players that have jacuzzis that are like these metal bathtubs that fit you, but you can't spread out. You just kind of go down into it, and you're like, it's either cold, it's either one with ice in it or hot water. And I had two of them, and I had this. They had this lift, right? They had like the beam that there was not a lift there, but they had a beam that they could, pick things up and move them, So I had this beam, and I put these things under there, and I put an electric winch thing, and I had this thing that I put around, was a harness around people. I'd hook them up to it, like one of those safety harnesses, and I put it on, and I would just pull them out of one, and then move them over, put them down to the other. So here's this guy's unconscious, and I had this great massage bed. It was, maybe 10 inches wider than most massage tables, and I had taken. I was working in hospitals and I had access to all this crazy hospital equipment. And I got myself a couple of dental chairs, right? And it had the electric pneumatic thing that raised the chair up and down, right? And so I took the chair off and put it over where I watched TV, and because it was pretty comfy. And I put my massage table on it so I could lift the massage table. And the lowest you could go was like 22 inches to the floor, because that's great for Thai massage, so that you can be on the floor and kneel on people and lean into people. And then I could raise it like almost 4 feet high. And there's no reason to do that. But that was my parameter. So I threw the guy on there and I did some, cranial sacral, and I did some, shiatsu. And then I stuck him up like a pincushion with acupuncture. And then I burnt some moxie that was my own device. And all his pulses started to respond quite nicely. So then I stuck him in the hot tub. And then I stuck him in the ice cubes. And then I stuck him back in the hot tub. And then I carried him over. I had this bedroom that the steel beam could take them right into this bedroom. Had a big, beautiful ELF bed and super duper memory phone. And I would, put him, had a nice cover on it. And then I put him there and I would swaddle the people really tight so they couldn't move, right? Swaddle them, but they were unconscious. And, I'd leave them there until I would come back. It was like baking cookies. And because the ELF bed would heat them up, right? And that was, creating an orgone field, right? Go read about Wilhelm Reich. And I had that, and I was doing that. And so I was doing all this stuff. That was, they don't even do that shit now, right? And it was a mixture of ancient and modern and all, it wasn't just one thing. I was a smorgasbord of healing because I studied with all these people. And so, I put them on this ELF bed, and I would check them out. And then when they started to like, okay, he's going to come to, I would, loosen them up so they wouldn't be like, and I'd loosen them up and then put a nice, smooth, yummy blanket over them, quilt. And then let them wake up. And I'd make a really nice pot of chamomile and ginger tea. And I'd have their clothes on this, suit rack, that stands on the floor, and their pants are like neatly there. And then their white shirt is neatly there. So however ruffled they were, their clothes are now I had a little ironing board. I just take the wrinkles out and leave it there. And I'd have their pants like so they could get it from bed, put them on, socks right there, shoes, and then put the shirt on, the tie, the jacket, and come out. And so this first guy, I had this place all done, and I had students. I was teaching at the Swiss Institute of Alternative Healing and Massage, and they'd been around 80 years teaching massage, and so I would bring my students there to show them all this alternative stuff before they hired me, because I was just teaching anatomy, and but after a while I got to be the guy who they had no alternative anything, and so I was the alternative medicine teacher. And so Swiss Institute, that doesn't quite sound. It was right on 10th Street, right near Herbert HB Studios, right in the West Village, right on 10th Street. It was a Swedish Institute. That's what it was, Swedish Institute. And so I had that place, and I would bring students there and teach them. And this guy was I picked him up, threw him on there, did all that stuff to him, put him into bed, and he woke up 3 hours later, and I'm sitting at the tea table, and it's like something out of MC Escher, because it's like 3 stories high, and there are all these bridges and staircases and platforms, and it's getting a little warm. It must be getting warm outside. And he said, "Is this heaven? I feel amazing. I can't even remember feeling this good." And he said, "Did I die?" And I said, "Well, you're almost dead. You were totally, you had OD'd on, you had pretty big speedball in you, and you're a little guy, and so you were next to death, right on the steps." Yeah, I remember, fainting right after I left that place. So I carried you up here and took care of you. He said, "What'd you do?" And I kind of ran through what I did to him and sat him down, and we talked for an hour, right? And I said, "What you've been doing is caused by, you're not an addict. You are, there are things in your life that are motivating you to be self-destructive. So let's talk about it." So we did for about an hour, and, he uncovered a few things. We didn't heal himself forever just that afternoon. And then I said, "Well, you know where I am?" And, he goes, "Well, how much do you want?" I said, "Well, just take it easy, go down the staircase, the door out to the hallway where I found you is right there. And there's a nice little basket, and there's some flowers in the vase. And all you have to do is put whatever you think this is worth in that basket, and you can come back. And, I do other things, but I'm normally here on Wednesdays and Thursdays and Saturdays, and I'm usually here between 11 and 1. And then I'm usually back by 5, and I'm here. So most evenings I'm back here by 5, but those ones I'm definitely here. And here's my phone number, and you can make an appointment. And I look forward to seeing you, in a few days. I think it was a Tuesday. I said, "You can come Friday, or you can come Monday, or you can come Tuesday. You can and just call me up." So he does that, and I don't go down. He leaves. He said, "Bye. You changed my life." Blah blah blah. I said, "Yep. Go be your best." So I didn't run down to see what he left there. I was up there, and I made myself another cup of tea. I made a little sandwich. I went over to and there's staircases every which way. And I had 2 big platforms that I made into bedrooms, one for the client and one for me and, whoever else was going to share my bed. I had a really nice bathroom, jacuzzi, shower. It was a large platform, like 50 feet by 50 feet. So it made a nice little suite. and it had a window out onto Pearl Street, and it looked over to the Battery and over towards down Wall Street, and there was this gigantic parking lot. So the sun was there. They now replaced it with that whole block is J.P. Morgan Trust, and so that whole area there is no sun. Where I was one of the places had sun on all four sides. Right, and I had all these windows, and I was way up in the bats of the belfry, and so you know. Next morning, I go do I have a project or two, go see some people, and I go down and I look in the little baskets, and there's 5 Benjamins, right? Not bad, for 2.5 hours work and saved the guy's life. And so he came back twice a week. I stayed there about 1.5 years, and he came back twice a week, and he told 4 other of his friends who came, and he didn't say how much he gave them. He just said, "This guy will change your life, and we have a lot of money. He doesn't. You just, he's worth whatever you give to him, but don't, if you insult him, it'd be a reflection on me." So some of those guys gave me 2, 3 times what he gave. He gave me more. I mean, that's all he had in his wallet. So I was making close to $3,000 a week for a year by spending 15 hours of the week with these guys. And I changed them, and they all had pretty important jobs in banks, and we talked about their worldview, and maybe that's why they were trying to kill themselves through drugs. And they all stopped, and they all changed their life, and they all had enough money where they kind of retired at 40 and got them a yacht and took the whole family to the Caribbean and lived down. They did things that they really wanted to, but they were stuck, so they didn't. They just kept making that money and spending it on stupid shit, right? And so that was a good 1.5 years. And what happened was a friend of mine, the guy, so all those guys, the nice Jewish boy, the Rasta boy. The Rasta boy was my real friend. He was a tight guy. He would come up and he loved my kitchen, and he would cook real Jamaican food. And he knew Mrs. Brown. Right? He knew Mrs. Brown in the grill. And so, and he heard stories of, Dr. Dude. And so it was quite amusing. And and that's how the world goes. I mean, just, the 7, points to everyone's knows Kevin Bacon, right? So, so the nice Jewish boy had a cousin who just got the job, who was a historian and a demographer and all the kind of stuff I was studying. And he was there the South Street Seaport was right next to the fish dock. And they were wanted to redo that and get it ready for the 1976 200th birthday, because they had the big ships coming from all over the world to come up the Hudson and go up the East River, go through Harlem River, come down the Hudson and go around. Anyway, so I was introduced to that guy, and they were paying him ridiculous amounts of money, and he needed a place to stay. And so, I had that extra bedroom, and I said, "So that's your bedroom, but I have this clientele, so I'm going to put another bed in here for you." And this big bed, which is this ELF bed, because he slept on it the first night, he said, "That bed is amazing. I had dreams, and I feel so great." I said, "Yeah, it's a special bed." I said, "You ever hear of Wilhelm Reich?" And he goes, "No." And so I said, "Well, go. You're Mr. You have these databases of you're building this museum over there, and you're making you a nice office with computers and stuff. Go look that up." And so he did. Anyway, long story short, that was his bedroom. He had the closet, he had the dresser, he had a nice bed, but the LF bed was for clientele, and he was never there when those guys showed up, so it was fine. And so he paid me, you know, they gave him a stipend of $1,000 a month to find a place, which was nothing for New York. And so he paid me that because he was getting paid a nice salary, and that's what they thought, that we're paying you a ridiculous salary, so we're going to give you $1,000 to cover, for, your lodging, whatever, and you work it out. So he gave me that now, and so I was making maybe 35 a month between him and the guys once he got there, and so anyway, everything was great. I was putting the money, and the guys were putting it in money markets, things that ran over every 6 months. These bonds that made ridiculous amounts of money, but only on the insiders knew this shit. So they took all that cash I had. About 3 months into it, I said, "So you guys are, what can I put all this? I haven't spent really anything that you gave me," and because I had a safe up there, and so I had my safe friend come and change the combo, and I had my safe, and because he couldn't figure out what the combo was, right? He got it. Luckily, it wasn't locked. He was like, "Well, if it's locked, we're just going to get rid of this thing, and I'll put another safe in." He opened it up. I said, "Oh, okay." And I said, "No, you can take the back and see what." And he took it up, and it was this weird ass Swiss thing that normally you can see what the numbers. It was like the Enigma machine. He goes, "No, I'm just going to take this out and replace this. The company still exists. I can take this out and put the things I know about in, and bingo, you'll have a safe that one." So I had a safe. So I had all that money in there, and after 3 months, I gave them most of it, and they invested in something that was like got me 4 times the return. So, man, after a year, I had some serious cash, and I left New York, and I went to Europe, and I almost bought a bunch of property in Ireland. And again, if I had done that, and I had stayed with the Irish doctor, I'd be there today, but I'd be a totally different guy. I would not have had half the experiences that I told you the stories about. So anyway, I took that money, and I got another chunk because the guy who was, the director of the new museum of South Street Seaport, they gave him a chunk of change to get himself a place, a steady place. And what better place to have than that was 3 blocks from his, from the museum, and that he could see it from that bedroom window. That was his bedroom, right? So I sold him the space, and I sold him the ELF bed. I mean, I didn't take anything with me. I left everything the way it was. He loved all of that stuff, and so he gave me a big chunk. So I had a serious amount of cash, And, if I had just rolled it over back to those guys, I'd be a zillionaire. If I just left it in their hands, because from that point, from 76, there was a really steady stock market incline, right? And until Billy Boy, right? And because, 76, there was this, great extreme economic crash, but the stock market was making a killing, and that's what the things those guys were investing my money. So in a very short period of time, I doubled or tripled the cash that I got from them, and I had a lot of cash. And I went to Europe, and I kind of traveled around. I didn't do and I had a lot of cash. So instead of like hitchhiking, I went first class the whole way, and I wasn't on the Swedish nickel either. So that was, and like I said, I spent a good deal of time in Ireland. That's when I spent almost a year in Ireland. And, like I said, I could have bought amazing properties with the cash I had, but I just spent it, I just because these people needed this, these people needed that. And the state wasn't coming across, so I had all this cash, so I did that. And when we would travel, we went to England, we went to see her family. I bought the kids, the boys, I got them suits. We went to London, and we went to this place where we all got decked out. I rented a really nice zippy car, and we drove in there, and her father, the Duke, was like, "Yeah, you got the right guy here." That's the kind of scumbags you've been, and your sister, my God. Anyway, so that was then. This is now. This has been a great story time. I do art. Well, that's good. I'm glad it's nice to have like a muse telling you a story, right? So I'm glad I was there. Loves 70s films. Yep. There's another Russian guy. Yeah. So I'm going to try my best, do my best to, because this afternoon, when I was like clicking the name and all that stuff, it said, what do you want your live chat? And I said public, and it said you could choose whether you wanted it, to, have it open, or just have it the people who were subscribers. And I hit subscribers, and it seemed to work pretty good, and it kept the bots out. So I'm going to have to be more stringent. I did it once. I'm sure I can do it again. So that would be nice, just to do that. Still, because all you guys are subscribers. So, and if you're not, I would subscribe. Otherwise, you're not going to get in. So, but I thought that was going to last forever. But I guess I have to do it every freaking time. So, anyway, so that is the story. I'm glad you all had a good time. Anybody wants to get a hold of me, get a hold of me at the dudeawake42@gmail. Anybody wants to throw anything in my PayPal, and people have, and thank you for that. And we're just chugging along nice, and I'm here, at John's, hopefully, I'm pretty sure I'll be able to stay until springtime. And hopefully, because he is, I've been here now 2 weeks, and he is better now than he was 2 weeks ago. So if he could do that little increment better 2 weeks, get that little better by the time I leave, he will be a lot better. And hopefully he will be able to be the decider. And he won't have to keep up the God Jesus lottery, and he can get rid of his laundry list and get out of the loop. Hopefully. Oh, look at that. Oh, I love when this happens. 3 hours, 33 minutes, and 33 seconds. This is a good time to go. I love you guys. I'll see you tomorrow in the AM.